Chapter 4:16, Longer than heaven and earth, greater than the great Tao. Xian Yuan Zizai Xian. What is Xian Yuan, and what is to be free? Guan seemed to be surrounded by myriad scenes, violently clashing against his will at times, with images from the past, images from the future, growing more chaotic, more frenzied. He didn't know how much time had passed. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, his consciousness arriving in a vast and glittering starry sky, no longer surrounded by those intricate and tangled scenes. His world appeared to become quiet all at once. His eyes regained their clarity, and one by one, figures walked out from within him, standing before him and turning to face him. A total of 5 figures. They were Chu Lu, Xiao Xingtian, Long Zhan, Lu Han, and Ji. His 5 reincarnated selves. Guan watched them, his eyes gradually firming. Behind these 5 reincarnated selves, in the depths of the starry sky, more figures emerged, their identities indiscernible to Guan, but he could sense they were also his reincarnated selves. Once he truly began to reincarnate, these selves would obtain their own identities. Their appearance signified that Guan had yet to sever his attachment to the cycle of reincarnation. Although they dressed differently, their figures resembled Guan. With each step they took, they flashed forward a great distance, rapidly closing in on him. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, their numbers surged, and soon, the starry sky before Guan was occupied by these countless figures, densely packed. Guan continued to sit cross-legged, gazing at his reincarnated selves before him, his expression unchanging. He was observing his reincarnated selves, and all his reincarnated selves were watching him, as if he were facing his true self. At this moment, Guan's Taoist heart gradually became enlightened. The original heart was not necessarily the true heart, nor were later gains necessarily obstacles. His current thoughts represented his true heart. Any moment he acted upon his own wishes was an expression of that heart. As long as his true heart did not conflict with his principles, it signified the right course of action for him. Even if the outcome of some matters was unfavorable, what of it? All he could pursue was his own life. At most, he could assist others, but he could not control their wills. Even if the outcome was destruction, wouldn't a period of pleasure before that destruction also count as a gain? Setting aside karma and fate, Guan needed to consider his own pursuits. Longevity? Too vacant. Through his cultivation so far, Guan increasingly understood the principle that the Tao is endless. How high must one's realm be to achieve longevity? If faced with a stronger being, could he maintain that longevity? Guan reviewed all his memories, including those of his reincarnations. His eyes gradually emitted brilliance. With a boom, the whole universe shattered, and Guan's consciousness returned to the present. He was still sitting cross-legged on the broken continent, protected by the lifespan barrier. Xian Yuan Zi Zai Xian Realm, early stage. The breakthrough was still ongoing. Guan's perception of the Tao became clearer, his comprehension of cause and effect, fate, and reincarnation deepened. These were mere transformations in the essence of his life. If one spoke of power, his mana far surpassed that of the Taoist hidden immortal realm. While the Tao's spiritual energy continued to flood his body, Guan began to probe this universe. His divine thought could see farther away. First, he saw a colossal gate deep in the universe, very similar to the land of extreme fall, where the heavenly spirit god who executed Ji was guarding such a gate. Boundary Gate. When executing Ji, the heavenly spirit god had mentioned the gate's name, adding that anyone who approached the boundary gate was defying the heavenly Tao and deserved to be utterly annihilated. Could every universe have a boundary gate? Guan saw that there was no one beneath the boundary gate, a silent and eerie void. Intuition told him that drawing near to the boundary gate would lead to trouble. He withdrew his gaze and looked in the direction of another great heaven and earth. His divine thought captured all creatures within it, even overhearing their interactions. This great heaven and earth was named the Great Vacuous Heaven and Earth and was home to 3 free immortals, also in a state of chaos. The disturbances in outer heaven had already caused unrest within the Great Vacuous Heaven and Earth. Factions of all kinds were striving to appease the creatures. Guan muttered an apology in his heart, but at that moment, he had no way to change his position and could only wait. He needed to advance, it was just unfortunate for the great vacuous heaven and earth. Suddenly hit by an idea, Guan lifted his right hand, and manna converged into seeds within his palm. He scattered them toward the great vacuous heaven and earth, where they disappeared into thin air as soon as they were released. Consider this my recompense, thought Guan. As he acted, he looked again towards the great vacuous heaven and earth and saw changes in its future. The fate of the heaven and earth developed branches, some branches dissipated, leaving others to extend, to grow and spread. Guan even saw that in the distant future, the great vacuous heaven and earth would collide with the great heavenly spirit land. Indeed, any variable could bring both fortune and calamity. Guan felt this way inside but held no regrets. Even without him, the great vacuous heaven and earth would eventually face variables. What are variables? They are forces that the rules of this heaven and earth cannot restrain. Anything from beyond this realm could become a variable. Time continued to flow. Guan's mana soared, and he did not neglect the lifespan barrier. The digits representing his lifespan flickered rapidly, but the numbers did not decrease significantly. An hour later, Guan's mana had finally soared to perfect completion within the Xian Yuan Zizai immortal realm, leaving him with over 1 billion years of lifespan. He stood up, twisted his neck, his body shimmering with a golden light, enchanting and mysterious, the radiance of a mixed Yuan Daoist golden body. He then vanished on the spot, directly burrowing into the reincarnation vortex and then heading toward the great heavenly spirit land. With one step into the reincarnation vortex and another step out, and yet another step, he had already arrived near the supreme sect. This was none other than the eternal measuring heaven Tao step. The vast expanse that lay between the great void heaven and earth and the great heavenly spirit land was immense, such a distant place that even for a free immortal, it was hard to reach, and even with the existence of the reincarnation vortex at present, how vast the reincarnation was. How many could find their way home in such a short time inside it? Guan inhaled the scent of flowers and grass in the mountains and his face revealed a smile. This place still made him feel at ease. Now approaching noon, just a night had passed, and Guan had already surpassed the Taoist hidden immortal, reaching the higher Xian Yuan Zizai immortal. And within the great heavenly spirit land, within this universe, he had yet to encounter the Taoist hidden immortal. Of course, the heavenly spirit god guarding the boundary gate did not count. Guan looked up and could already make out the figure of the heavenly spirit god. The fact that the heavenly spirit god could live to the utmost epoch was enough to prove his power. In the eyes of numerous cultivators, doesn't he represent immortality, eternal life? Guan did not take any more glances at the heavenly spirit god, for fear of being noticed by him. With his strength, confronting the heavenly spirit god was still very dangerous. Moreover, he had no enmity with the heavenly spirit god, so why provoke him? Within the great heavenly spirit land, he already had the confidence to deal with anything. There was no need to be so cautious next, but he still had to keep one hand hidden. Guan could let people know he was the sword venerable Fudao, but he could not let them know how strong he really was. What he contested for was not the transient strength but the future of countless eons. No matter how the world changed, how the sun, moon, and stars shifted, he wanted to witness all the changes forever. He intended to live longer than the great heaven and earth, longer than the great Tao itself. He aimed to become a symbol of eternity. He wanted to enjoy the solitude of immortality. Guan's lips curved upward, his right hand touching the passing flowers and grass, and after being brushed by his fingers, those flowers and plants all burst with vitality, slightly quivering as if about to become sentient. After another hour, Guan leisurely set foot into Mystic Valley. Inside the valley, there were disciples weeding, others sowing seeds, and some cultivating spells, resembling a small sect bustling with life. Seeing Guan return, the disciples immediately greeted him. After spending 30 minutes in Mystic Valley, Guan returned to the Third Medicine Valley. The Third Medicine Valley was now the center of his life. The place that Mystic Valley occupied in his heart was no longer so important. As he arrived at the Third Medicine Valley, a figure appeared out of nowhere in front of Guan. It was Ji Xiaoyu. Ji Xiaoyu was about to speak when her gaze suddenly fixed. She stared at Guan, her brows furrowing. Guan was dressed the same as the day before, but there was a significant change in his demeanor that even made Ji Xiaoyu pause. "Shall we go, to play chess, to your abode, or to the dojo?" Guan asked with a smile. The so-called dojo was the area for playing chess, where dozens of chess tables were set up. Every day, people would come to play. Ji Xiaoyu gathered her thoughts and said, "Let's go to the dojo. I've also been wanting to really feel life lately." Guan heard the implication in her words but did not say much more and immediately led her to the dojo. Last night, Ji Xiaoyu couldn't help but ask as she turned to look at Guan, full of confusion. Guan, looking forward, laughed and said, "I went to practice last night and had a bit of an epiphany." "It seems you've had quite the realization." "That's right, you should see who I am," Guan said proudly, and Ji Xiaoyu felt like punching his smug smile, but as he laughed in such a way, she felt their relationship return to normal, with the distance she felt a moment ago completely vanished. Ji Xiaoyu studied Guan and said, "You wouldn't be hiding your cultivation level, would you?" Although Gu An's cultivation level had not increased, she thought carefully and realized that his aura was constantly changing, and this was definitely not an illusion. "You guessed it right. In fact, I'm very strong now. Even if your true form awakens, you might not be my match. Master Pewdie actually wrote about me." Guan glanced at her seriously. Ji Xiaoyu rolled her eyes at him. All of the dojo's chess tables were occupied, but when Guan arrived, 2 disciples voluntarily gave up their seats, and the cultivators playing chess had their eyes drawn to Guan. As Guan and Ji Xiaoyu sat down, a good number of people gathered around. The 9-fingered Divine Lord also arrived, looking at Guan with a strange expression. He likewise felt that Gu An's demeanor had changed dramatically. What was the story with this boy? Could he be related to Sword Venerable Fudao? The 9-fingered Divine Lord had always been baffled by how Guan managed to win against him and suddenly had a bold thought. Could it be that Sword Venerable Fudao was advising Guan on his chess play? Maybe. Yes. That must be it. The 9-fingered Divine Lord's gaze toward Guan was filled with anger. The boy had no sense of martial morality. Guan let Ji Xiaoyu make the first move, and she did not hold back. After 7 moves, Guan sensed that Ji Xiaoyu was mobilizing the power of the primordial Daoist talisman. She indeed came prepared. The 9-fingered Divine Lord, shocked, looked towards Ji Xiaoyu and marveled inwardly. What kind of power was this? Chapter 4:17. Why don't you just say you are the divine thought true immortal? The primordial Daoist talisman continuously unleashed the power belonging to the reincarnation path emperor, causing Ji Xiaoyu's divine sense to rapidly strengthen. Whether it was Ji Xiaoyu or the 9-fingered Divine Lord, both understood that the competition in Go was about the power of calculation. Precisely because of this, they felt unwilling to accept that Guan, with his lower cultivation level, could continually win against them. The 9-fingered Divine Lord, sensing Ji Xiaoyu's aura quickly strengthening, secretly felt shocked. More and more great cultivators were attracted to the scene, and even Shenxinzi and Long Qing came over. Guan and Ji Xiaoyu played speedily, full of murderous intent, causing the surrounding people to hardly dare breathe. A figure appeared out of thin air beside Ji Xiaoyu. It was the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, who looked at the Go board, frowning, wanting to speak but stopping himself. An Xian and Yu Yingying also walked over, watching the Go match from within the crowd. Even those with lower cultivation levels could feel Ji Xiaoyu's increasingly strong momentum. Yu Yingying looked at Ji Xiaoyu, secretly surprised. Her curiosity about Ji Xiaoyu's background deepened. She had only heard that Ji Xiaoyu came from the Ji family. Ji Xiaoyu was definitely the most mysterious existence in the Third Medicine Valley. She was always in seclusion and only had a good relationship with Guan. An Xian was equally curious about Ji Xiaoyu's strength. Knowing Ji Xiaoyu was powerful, and Guan had said she had talent not inferior to An Hao, how could she not be curious? As Ji Xiaoyu's momentum continued to soar, thunderclouds surged over from the horizon, violently churning, darkening the sky rapidly, with the sound of thunder echoing. Disciples in the valley looked up one after another, abuzz with alarm, and even disciples from other cities of the Supreme Sect and Medicine Valley were drawn by the anomaly. What's going on? Is someone undergoing tribulation crossing? It seems the commotion comes from the dojo. Feel it carefully. There is a momentum that is quickly strengthening. Indeed, many people are running there. Shall we go have a look too? What's there to be afraid of? In the Supreme Sect, we wouldn't even fear if the sky fell. The Valley disciples discussed among themselves, many rushing toward the dojo, wanting to see exactly what was happening. Holding a white stone, Guan looked at Ji Xiaoyu and asked, "Is it necessary to go to this extent?" Once the power of the primordial Daoist talismans was used too much, it would trigger expulsion by the reincarnation rules. Guan could see Ji Xiaoyu's lifespan was decreasing. Ji Xiaoyu lifted her eyes to look at him and said, "I must defeat you at least once to have no regrets. Fighting it out on the go board is pretty good." Guan stared at her and laughed. "Even so, I will not admit defeat. In my life, I've never truly lost, and if I ever lost, it could only be to myself." Unable to restrain himself, the Nine-Finger Divine Lord spoke, "You really like to put on an act. Anyone who doesn't know might think your sword Venerable Fudao." Guan glanced at him and said, "How can a defeated dog bark so boldly? I'll crush you shortly." The Nine-Finger Divine Lord's face turned red with anger, yet he didn't know how to retort. The other spectators found it amusing but didn't dare to offend the Nine-Finger Divine Lord. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, looking at Gu An's play, had an increasingly odd expression. He didn't stop Ji Xiaoyu's thinking. For him, he served the Reincarnation Path Emperor, not Ji Xiaoyu. He couldn't wait for Ji Xiaoyu to recover into the Reincarnation Path Emperor. The two continued playing Go. Ji Xiaoyu's style was sharp and fierce, making frequent killing moves, but Guan always managed to counter them. The onlooking crowd secretly marveled. They too enjoyed Go and had their own studies, able to recognize the high level of Ji Xiaoyu's play, and each move's attack and strategy surprised them. Yet, despite that, Guan always managed to resolve Ji Xiaoyu's every aggressive move. His play was not as overpowering as Ji Xiaoyu's, but it gave off an undefeatable momentum. Boom! A clap of thunder resounded beneath the storm clouds, startling many. Looking at the Go board, Ji Xiaoyu's face was cold, her eyes filled with a compelling force, and the momentum of her moves continued to strengthen. In contrast, Guan looked composed, his speed of play neither hurried nor slow. Time quickly passed. As time went on, Ji Xiaoyu's moves became slower and slower. With the strengthening power of the primordial Daoist talisman, her calculation speed increased. However, no matter how much she sped up, she couldn't turn the tide of attack, and the pressure mounted with each move made, even giving her the feeling that she could not defeat Guan. Ji Xiaoyu lifted her eyes to Guan and saw the smile on his face, out of place compared to the furrowed brows and intense tension of the onlookers. The player seemed as calm as the gentle wind and clouds. The more confident he was, the less sure Ji Xiaoyu felt inside. Could it really be that she would be forced to reveal her true self? Ji Xiaoyu frowned, a shade of hesitation flickering in her eyes. Suddenly, Guan made his move, his voice clear, "Let's stop here, you've lost." Ji Xiaoyu's frown deepened, and as she was about to speak, Guan raised his hand and drew the Go containers toward him. Before Ji Xiaoyu could react, Guan waved his right hand, and the Go stones from both containers sprang out, black and white stones successively landing on the board. Everyone was taken aback, not understanding what he was doing. Ji Xiaoyu looked at the Go board, her expression rapidly changing. The expressions of the Nine-Finger Divine Lord and the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor also turned odd. As the black and white stones continued to fall, with other stones rising, the path played by the black stones appeared no different from when Ji Xiaoyu personally played. After 10 breaths, no more stones fell, and the situation on the board was decided, with white winning. The others also realized, had Guan simulated Ji Xiaoyu's play? They were all cultivators with extraordinary memories, unlike ordinary people, recalling the situation of the previous moves. The higher the cultivation level, the quicker their expressions changed. Their gazes toward Guan were filled with disbelief. Could he really calculate that? Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor had the highest cultivation level, and he covertly compared them. The Go strategy simulated by Ji Xiaoyu was very strong. If it were him, it wouldn't have been easy to win. Nine-Finger Divine Lord looked at Guan, opened his mouth, but ultimately, he couldn't utter a word. Guan looked toward Nine-Finger Divine Lord and asked with a smile, "Fancy a game?" Nine-Finger Divine Lord's expression turned serious. "Forget it, another day maybe. Today's game was very impressive, it gave me a lot to ponder, I need to comprehend it well." Guan laughed, this senior's tone was perfectly captured. He looked toward Ji Xiaoyu and asked with a smile, "What's the matter? Can't handle losing?" Ji Xiaoyu took a deep breath and turned to Guan. "I lost." The innate Taoist talisman within her began to stabilize and her imposing aura dissipated. She stood up and walked to the side. Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor took the chance to sit down. "Let's play a game." Guan looked at him and asked, "Do you even know how to play?" "How could I not? I've played here a few times before." Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor glared at Guan, annoyed, feeling that the kid was too arrogant. Ji Xiaoyu came to Guan's side, her eyes complex, wondering about something. Nine-Finger Divine Lord, having seen Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor once before, always thought him to have profound and unfathomable cultivation. He became interested, wanting to see if Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor could beat Guan. Faced with the challenge from Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, Guan naturally wouldn't refuse. The two quickly got down to the fight. The others continued to watch the battle. An hour later, Guan stood up, looking down at Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor under Ji Xiaoyu's shocked gaze. "Go is not as simple as you think." The surrounding disciples immediately cheered. They were unclear about Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor's identity, but inside the Third Medicine Valley, they definitely supported Guan. Nine-Finger Divine Lord, Shenxinzi, and several other immortal Tao great cultivators looked at the Go board, finding it hard to snap back to reality for a long time. Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor trembled all over, his face full of disbelief. "How is this possible?" Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor muttered to himself, unable to believe that he lost. Seeing Guan turn around, he immediately stood up and asked sternly, "Stop right there, who are you really? You're not Guan." When he said this, everyone followed suit in looking toward Guan, including Shenxinzi and Nine-Finger Divine Lord. Long Qing couldn't help but say, "What do you mean? Losing to my master and throwing a fit out of anger?" Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor stared intently at Guan's back. "My cultivation is above the immortal Tao fourth layer heaven. Do you think he can beat me just like that? The Go strategies I can calculate are beyond what a mortal spirit can imagine." Above immortal Tao fourth layer heaven? Above heaven and earth flying immortal? Even Nine-Finger Divine Lord and Shenxinzi were startled, their gazes at Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor turning to fear. Guan turned to the side, looking contemptuously at Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor. "Immortal Tao fourth layer heaven? Why don't you just claim you're a divine thought true immortal?" Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor's face changed drastically, and Ji Xiaoyu's expression also shifted. She looked at Guan, feeling he was very unfamiliar. Guan stared at Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor. "Since you're aware I'm stronger than you, how dare you speak to me like that while hiding in my residence?" His tone was indifferent, yet it exuded an immense pressure. The disciples discovered for the first time that their master could be this intimidating. However, they had never heard of divine thought true immortal. Even Nine-Finger Divine Lord and Shenxinzi were pondering what realm divine thought true immortal was. Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor's face turned extremely ugly, his heart beating wildly as he faced Guan's gaze, feeling even more nervous than if he were causing trouble in the holy court. "You are," Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor said through gritted teeth, but the words "sword venerable Fudao" were impossible to pronounce. Guan turned around and said to Ji Xiaoyu with a smile, "Let's go, back to the room to talk." Ji Xiaoyu nodded subconsciously and then followed him away. Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor stood in place, staring as they left. The others exchanged glances, all filled with confusion. Long Qing approached Shenxinzi, asking in a low voice, "Master, what realm is divine thought true immortal?" Shenxinzi did not answer. He too wanted to know the answer to this question. Nevertheless, one thing was clear to him, divine thought true immortal was above heaven and earth flying immortal, and Guan was most likely even stronger than a divine thought true immortal, otherwise, how could he have frightened Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor into such a state? And Xian was the only one not surprised, only excited. She too wanted to display her powers in front of others like her master had. Her motivation for immortal cultivation grew stronger, and she immediately turned and left to practice diligently. On the way to the loft, Ji Xiaoyu looked at Guan, her heart filled with 1,000 words to say. Have you awakened your memories from a past life? Ji Xiaoyu couldn't help but ask. She had previously speculated that it could be a reincarnation of the free immortal, and now she was even more certain of this, otherwise how could Guan suppress Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor? As for whether Guan could be Sword Venerable Fudao, she didn't think it was likely. Sword Venerable Fudao had taken action more than once. Reincarnators who utilized their true form's power would be expelled by the reincarnation rules. Chapter 418, Invincible Across the Supreme Sect, Awoken Past Life Memories? I suppose that's one way to put it. Guan turned to Ji Xiaoyu with a smile and answered, having indeed recalled many memories from his past life. Ji Xiaoyu, upon hearing this, had a complex look in her eyes. She could sense that Guan had chosen to end the chess game early because he feared she was expending too much vitality. As a result, Guan had also been forced to reveal his cultivation level. Her mood was a mix of various emotions. Surprise, astonishment, reluctance, concern, regret, and more swirled within her. Guan saw through her thoughts, raised his shoulders with a smile, and said, "Don't be dissatisfied. We can play chess again in the future, and you'll have more opportunities." "I fear I may not have much time left," Ji Xiaoyu murmured in a low voice. Guan turned his head to look at her and asked, "So, what do you want to do with the remaining time?" Ji Xiaoyu was the Reincarnation Path Emperor, and the Reincarnation Path Emperor was Ji Xiaoyu. It was only the differing memories that caused her fleeting emotional turmoil. Guan could transfer the memories of this life of Ji Xiaoyu to another person, but that wouldn't separate Ji Xiaoyu from the Reincarnation Path Emperor. Because there is only one soul. Moreover, memories and experiences can influence one's character, but one's true nature is determined at birth. Ji Xiaoyu understood this as well, so she never thought about breaking away from the Reincarnation Path Emperor. Her disquiet stemmed from her inability to imagine how her will would return to her original self after this life ended, as she couldn't feel the emotions from her past life memories when recalling them. What do I want to do? Indeed, I need to give it some thought, Ji Xiaoyu mused. Guan offered no suggestions, letting her think for herself. The two returned to the house. While back in the dojo, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor disappeared from sight, and the onlookers gathered to discuss the chess game that had just ended. Shenxinzi looked toward Gu An's loft from a distance, took a deep breath, and said, "Your master is no ordinary person." Long Qing, who stood nearby, couldn't help but roll his eyes at the remark. As if I couldn't see it for myself. Long Qing's feelings were equally complicated. He was close to Guan, always regarding him as a father, but in his heart, Shenxinzi was stronger. To cultivate with Shenxinzi, he had spent a significant amount of time with him, which resulted in less and less time spent with Guan. Yet, the scene just now showed Gu An's aura even overpowering that mysterious great cultivator. That was someone even more formidable than Immortal Tao Fourth Layer Heaven. Did this mean that Guan could be stronger than his master, Shenxinzi? Long Qing suddenly felt this to be absurd, even hard to accept. If this were true, why didn't he cultivate with Guan from the beginning? Long Qing's gaze shifted to an Xian, who was walking away in the distance. Suddenly, he thought that an Xian might know something. He must ask. How could someone so close to him hide such a cultivation level? What did it all mean? The altercation between Guan and the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor became known in the days that followed, and the words divine thought true immortal remained in people's memories. 3 days later. LV Badian and Ji Hantian came to find Guan. He received them, asking them to sit while he went to pour tea. Is it true that a being with a cultivation level above the Immortal Tao Fourth Layer Heaven has appeared in Medicine Valley? And that you managed to suppress them? LV Badian couldn't help but ask, his expression tense. His first reaction to the news was disbelief, but when his subordinates claimed to have witnessed it, he had to take it seriously. Currently, the Supreme Sect did not have a great cultivator of the immortal Tao fourth layer heaven to rely on. Sword Venerable Fudao did not count, for no one knew his cultivation level. Now, not only had the heaven and earth flying immortal phenomenon occurred, but his most promising, Guan, allegedly could suppress such an existence. Impossible. LV Badian found the notion ludicrous, even suspecting that his own training had gone wrong, trapping him in an illusion realm. Ji Hantian's feelings were similar, with Ji Xiaoyu originating from a Ji family house servant. No matter what kind of fortuitous encounters Head had, it was impossible for him to be so powerful. Since you're already aware, why ask me? Guan responded casually. When he had attained the Xian Yuan's Zai Xian, he decided he no longer needed to disguise himself as before, as long as he did not reveal his true strength. Even the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court wouldn't suspect that Sword Venerable Fudao surpassed the Zai Xian, and by 2 whole great realms at that. The strongest of them, Xingtian, was still striving to reach the Taoist hidden immortal. Hearing Gu An's words, LV Badian and Ji Hantian's eyes widened as they instinctively looked at each other. Ji Hantian signaled LV Badian with a glance, and after hesitating for a moment, LV Badian subtly nodded. Immediately after, Ji Hantian suddenly stood up and swung his palm towards Guan, who had his back to him. But as soon as he moved, he was immobilized, unable to take a step, and he couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. Guan turned around, holding 2 cups of tea and walked toward Ji Hantian. As their eyes met, Ji Hantian's were filled with disbelief. As Guan approached him, he sensed an incredibly terrifying presence, as if Gu An's aura could crush him. If there's a next time, you'll die even if I don't lift a finger, Guan stated flatly, looking at Ji Hantian without emotion. Ji Hantian was drenched in cold sweat. LV Badian hurriedly stood and said, he only wanted to test you, he had no intention of harming you. He too was terrified, looking at Guan with fear in his eyes. With such momentum, it was absolutely an immortal Tao existence. Without any exaggeration, LV Badian had never in his life felt such a powerful aura. As for the terrifying beings like Sword Venerable Fudao and Immortal Lord Xiu, their presence was directed towards heaven and earth, far from LV Badian. This time, it was a face-to-face feeling. Guan retracted his aura and placed 2 cups of tea on the table. He sat down casually, then leaned back in the chair, looking at LV Badian and the other person, asking, now that it's confirmed, what are you going to do next? His tone was casual and he didn't emit an overwhelming aura, but it paradoxically brought an almost suffocating pressure to LV Badian and his companion. They had never imagined this young man could possess such spirit. At the same time, they pondered over Gu An's words, unable to determine his attitude. Was Guan hiding his strength, or did he not mind revealing it? Should they help Guan with the aftermath? Guan was not in a hurry, waiting for them to think. Seeing Guan not rushing them, the pressure on the 2 men increased, and they even began to sweat profusely on their foreheads. LV Badian looked up at Guan, somewhat dazed. The Guan that he had tried to take care of and favored over the years turned out to be so powerful. He suddenly thought of something. Could it be that Guan was very strong from the beginning? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Since he had met Guan, he had never seen him panic. The young man seemed to fear nothing, no matter how tough or treacherous the path. A pursuit of a simple life could be because he was strong enough to have seen the splendor of the world. Could he be Sword Venerable Fudao? Once this thought occurred to him, LV Badian startled himself. He looked at Guan, meeting Gu An's seemingly smiling gaze. LV Badian broke into a cold sweat as he thought about his actions over the years and the suggestions Guan had made. Many things finally clicked together. No wonder he said that he would never reach the unification realm in this lifetime. It turned out that he simply held the unification realm in contempt. Ji Hantian didn't think that much, he was just puzzled as to why Guan was so strong. After all, Guan was a house servant of the Ji family. Ji Hantian had investigated Guan early on and was certain of Gu An's true identity. Could it be that the current Guan was not the same person he knew and had been replaced by a great cultivator? That was the only possibility. How could a junior of over 700 years old be so powerful? Even and Hao had not necessarily stepped into the Nirvana realm to this day. LV Badian took a deep breath and said, regarding your cultivation level, we won't disclose it and won't disturb your life. Ji Hantian came back to reality and quickly echoed him. No longer did he bear his usual haughtiness. In front of Guan, he appeared scared and apprehensive. Guan thought to himself that even if they had said something, it wouldn't matter, but the quietness was welcome. He spoke, drink the tea. This tea is a long-treasured favorite of mine. The two men nodded hastily, following up by picking up their tea, but their hands were trembling. 30 minutes later, the two men walked out of the attic, with Guan coming out to see them off. Long Qing, who was chatting with the Blood Prison Great Saint, turned his head to look and saw the sect leader and vice-sect leader bowing and scraping to his master, which caused him to frown. Guan watched as the two left and then turned to Long Qing with a smile. Without waiting for Long Qing to speak, he went straight back into his room and slammed the door shut with a bang. Long Qing opened his mouth, realizing that his master was intentionally avoiding him. It was understandable. Remembering how he used to boast about how strong his second master was in front of his master made his face burn with embarrassment. Elsewhere, LV Badian and Ji Hantian were traveling on clouds, conversing in low voices. What should we do from now on? Ji Hantian asked, his expression complex. He truly didn't know what to do with Guan. They could no longer treat him as a subordinate, but given their past relationship, he felt awkward about trying to flatter Guan directly. LV Badian looked towards the horizon and replied, pretend as if we know nothing of this, and from now on, treat well those who have a good relationship with him. After all, he has worked diligently for the Supreme Sect, and those who are on good terms with him must also have made significant contributions to the Supreme Sect. The Supreme Sect cannot let them go unrewarded. After hearing this, Ji Hantian's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but admire LV Badian. Indeed, there is a difference between the sect leader and the vice-sect leader. In the days that followed, the rumors about the Third Medicine Valley were suppressed, but in the hearts of the disciples in the valley, Guan had become a mysterious great cultivator. They worked even harder, hoping to gain Guan's favor. Time flew by. During the autumn, Yilan and Jinqin came to find Guan. The two women climbed upstairs and entered the room. Master, we're now elders in the Hall of Elders of the subsect. Nowadays, in the subsect, we're second only to one and above 10,000. Jinqin said excitedly. Although this had been decided for several months, every time she brought it up, she was ecstatic. Guan raised his eyebrows, surprised. That impressive? Yilan, on the other hand, stared at Guan and asked, this must have something to do with you, right? No matter how great our achievements are, with our cultivation levels as they are, it's nearly impossible to enter the Hall of Elders. Upon hearing this, Jinqin turned to look at Guan, thinking he would either be modest or deny it. Instead, Guan answered, perhaps someone wants to curry favor with me. At that, Jinqin's eyes widened, and she asked in astonishment, who could use 2 seats in the Hall of Elders to curry favor with you? Guan proudly said, I'll be honest with you, I'm very strong now. Without any exaggeration, I could defeat anyone in the Supreme Sect. From now on, you can walk sideways if you like. Chapter 419, The Power of Tens of Millions of Years. For real, you think you can still beat Sword Venerable Fudao? Jinqin chuckled, teasingly responding to Guan's claim. Guan raised his right fist and declared, my punch carries the power of tens of thousands of years. Could Sword Venerable Fudao withstand it? Tui, tui, tui. Don't talk nonsense, be careful lest the old master hears you. Jinqin suddenly became anxious. After saying that, she stood up, bowed towards the window with her hands pressed together, apologizing on behalf of Guan. Guan watched with a desire to laugh but did not stop her, simply observing Jinqin's performance with amusement. Yilan, on the other hand, was not afraid. She had always felt that there was a connection between Guan and Sword Venerable Fudao. Guan's words implied that his relationship with Sword Venerable Fudao was extremely good, so good that he could even joke with his superior. This made her quite happy. The better Guan's relationship with Sword Venerable Fudao, the safer she would be in the days to come. After Zhenqin apologized for quite some time, under Guan's urging, she sat down again. Guan inquired about their experiences in the Hall of Elders, and the two women did not hide anything. When they first joined the Hall of Elders, they faced much ostracism, and some even publicly humiliated them. However, the next morning, those people came to visit and apologized. After that, the Hall of Elders changed its attitude towards them, treating them very well. Yilan took this opportunity to grow her influence, and to her surprise, rather than being suppressed, the Hall of Elders even paved the way for them. So, Yilan concluded that someone must be helping them from behind. After much consideration, the only person they could think of who was capable of doing this was Guan. In the Supreme Sect, there were numerous women with more outstanding looks and higher cultivation levels than them. None of the great cultivators on the immortal path were interested in them, so it was easy to figure out the answer. From now on, perform your duties in the elder seats without worry, and don't feel too much pressure. If you encounter something you can't solve, come to me. Guan spoke earnestly. This was something the old him would never have said, not because he had become more powerful, but because Ji Xiaoyu's situation had made him realize that the time left for those around him was not long. He had billions of years, even more, of lifespan, but others were different. 100 years flew by in an instant, and how many centuries could a person live? In times of great chaos, it was possible that while he was distracted, the people he cared about might be enduring hardship. Why not be more open-hearted? Yilan responded, "Don't worry, welcome to you." Zhenqin nodded in agreement as well. They began to talk about interesting stories from their subsect. Guan listened intently, occasionally laughing genuinely. As dusk approached, Zhenqin left, while Yilan decided to stay one more night before leaving. Night fell. While watching Guan read, Yilan casually asked, "Brother, what do you think of Miss G?" Guan's gaze remained fixed on the green hero travelogue he was holding as he countered, "Why ask so suddenly?" The atmosphere downstairs had become unnatural again. Ji Xiaoyu was eavesdropping. "Actually, I think you two are quite a match. With her talent, instead of enjoying fame and fortune, she stays in Medicine Valley, which is clearly for you." Yilan spoke softly, her eyes fixed on Guan, seemingly observing any change in his expression. Guan replied, "I know." Upon hearing his answer, Yilan's gaze flickered. Guan looked up at her and said, "Her reasons for staying include me, but there are other reasons as well. In life, especially for a cultivator, there are more important things to pursue, right?" Yilan smiled at his words, saying, "Yeah, in my 40s all I was concerned about was you, enchained by emotions. Now I have more to pursue. Rather than some nominal reputation, what matters more to me is that we are both alive and can keep each other company." She paused, then added, "Actually, I brought her up because I hope you, brother, would seriously consider her feelings. I can't accompany you forever. It's best if you don't cling to the past and keep forming new relationships, whatever those may be. At the very least, this will make you less lonely in the future." Having caught the eye of Sword Venerable Fudao and possessing the primordial reincarnation skill, Yilan believed Guan would live a very long time, and she was destined to be just a passerby in his life. Rather than claiming possession, she hoped he would live freely in the future. In her view, her brother deserved all the world's beauty. Guan looked at her without offering comfort, instead smiling and asking, "What's wrong with being alone?" "The terrible thing is being perpetually alone. Don't worry, I have many friends, and have you ever seen me feeling down? As for Ji Xiaoyu, she too can't accompany me for long. Don't think about how long you can be with me, but what I can do with you and for how long." Yilan instinctively wanted to ask what was wrong with Ji Xiaoyu, but she refrained, realizing that if even Guan couldn't solve the problem with Ji Xiaoyu, what could she do? There was no need to spoil her brother's mood. "That's true, I'm just a mortal whose life is blessed by association with you, brother." Yilan covered her mouth and laughed, her comment seemed jesting, but it was earnest. Without Guan, she would not have her current status and power, and might well have died hundreds of years earlier. Every additional day she lived, she owed a bit more to Guan, at least, that's how she saw it. Guan gave her a glaring look and said, "What nonsensical talk. Since when has fate been hierarchical? Meeting you is my good fortune as well." "Really?" Yilan's eyes crinkled with laughter, making her look quite charming. Guan raised his hand, placing it on the table with his palm up. Yilan hesitated for a moment, then reached out her hand, which Guan took hold of readily. "Focus on your cultivation, don't worry about what might be or might not be. I will accompany you on the journey of immortal cultivation. If we don't reach the immortal realm in this lifetime, I will find you in the next. Even if you've forgotten me, it's enough that I remember you." Guan stared into Yilan's eyes, speaking earnestly. Yilan's eyes widened. It was the first time she had heard Guan make such a pledge. "Brother," Yilan said emotionally, her gaze filled with tender affection for Guan. Guan casually drew out a book, asking, "This is a book I've been working on recently, want to take a look?" Yilan's attention shifted to the book's cover, and she saw 3 characters. Dream of the Red Chamber. As autumn was drawing to a close, one day, Guan rode down from the transmission array platform on the back of the blood prison Great Saint, with an Xian following by his side. Suddenly, a figure charged over and blocked the way of the blood prison Great Saint. It was Long Qing. He looked at Guan with a face full of anger, and in his eyes, there was also a sense of grievance. Guan sat on the blood prison Great Saint's back, his gaze lazy, and said, "What do you really want?" An Xian looked at Long Qing and found it amusing but held back her laughter. If it had been before, she might have spoken for Long Qing. However, she had experienced Long Qing's swagger too, feeling that this youngster's temperament indeed needed tempering. "Look how honest and Xingtian from Mystic Valley is." Facing Gu An's gaze, Long Qing opened his mouth but didn't know how to express his feelings. The blood prison Great Saint wouldn't indulge him and said, "Don't get in the way. Someone has already taught you cultivation, yet you still want the master to teach you?" Long Qing's face turned entirely red, and he was at a loss for what to do. After all, Guan had raised him himself, and he didn't make things difficult for him but said, "In fact, you harbor a starting point that others do not have, and one could even say that you are already strong, it's just that you haven't discovered it yet. Rather than blindly striving to get stronger, what you should do is take a deep breath and understand yourself." From a distance, Shen Xinzi was eavesdropping and pondered upon hearing these words. He had long noticed that Long Qing was no ordinary individual. Without a trace of spiritual power, Long Qing's physical strength and qi blood surged rapidly. In terms of spiritual power, Long Qing was worthless, but when it came to the growth rate of true strength, he was definitely a rare talent in the world. Could it be that Long Qing truly harbored a power even he hadn't noticed? After hearing Gu An's words, Long Qing was shocked, unable to tell if what Guan said was true or false. An Xian and the blood prison Great Saint both looked at Long Qing with astonishment. They wouldn't believe Guan would lie. "Do I really still have potential?" Long Qing couldn't help but ask, his face showing both nervousness and anticipation. Guan dismounted and walked up to Long Qing, resting his right hand on Long Qing's shoulder. Instantly, Long Qing's face turned pale, and his body began to tremble. "How does it feel?" Guan asked. Long Qing clenched his teeth and said, "It hurts a bit." It was more than a bit. He felt like his body was about to fall apart, but he couldn't show weakness in front of his master. He was puzzled in his heart and didn't know what his master was doing. Testing him? A smile appeared on Gu An's face. As soon as he smiled, Long Qing's complexion turned deathly pale, and his body trembled even more violently, even his lips quivering. Large beads of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. At that moment, he felt his body no longer belonged to him. He even felt his body had decayed, as he lost sensation, and his mind went blank, devoid of all thoughts. An Xian saw something was amiss with him and took 2 steps forward, but she still restrained her concern. How could the master possibly harm Long Qing? Guan withdrew his hand, and Long Qing immediately collapsed to the ground like a lump of mud. He instinctively looked up at Guan, his eyes filled with fear. Passing disciples gave them curious or puzzled looks, thinking that Guan was disciplining Long Qing, unaware of what offense Long Qing had committed. Guan looked down at Long Qing and asked, "What did you just feel?" Long Qing took deep breaths, struggling to raise his head, and said with an afraid look, "Felt like I was about to die, but you didn't die." Guan stared at him with an indifferent gaze that made him feel afraid, causing him to subconsciously lower his head. Just now, if it were a Mahayana cultivator, they'd have been reduced to ash. Guan left these words behind and then walked past Long Qing. Long Qing widened his eyes and twisted his head to look at Guan's retreating figure, his expression one of disbelief. An Xian and the Blood Prison Great Saint were also stunned. For an Xian, the Mahayana realm was still a far-off dream, while the Blood Prison Great Saint was itself a Mahayana cultivator. Was this youngster Long Qing already more formidable than a Mahayana cultivator? They both felt it was absurd in their hearts. Shenxinzi appeared out of thin air in front of Long Qing, crouching down to check his body, his face quickly revealing a look of shock. "Impossible," Shenxinzi murmured to himself, sensing his worldview collapsing. Long Qing didn't know what his master was thinking, his mind was echoing Guan's words. If it had been a Mahayana cultivator, they would have been reduced to ash. He recalled the terrifying sensation from before and suddenly felt it may not have been so scary after all. Meanwhile, Guan's image in his heart soared immensely. Chapter 420. The power of the past. Since being informed of his potential by Guan, Long Qing stopped cultivating his physical body. Instead, he began to settle his mind and feel the foundation of his own being. Shenxinzi had no objections to this. Shenxinzi felt that he was not worthy to teach Long Qing. He appeared calm on the outside but was very lost at heart. Having stayed in the Third Medicine Valley for hundreds of years, he had seen through nothing and learned nothing. Autumn gave way to winter. Snow fell from the sky, plunging the great heaven and earth into an expanse of whiteness. That day, after the morning exercises were over, Guan stood by the wooden rail admiring the snow's cape. The snowflakes landing on his body turned into mist, swirling around him. His eyes were fixed on the garden, but his divine thought was cast towards outer heaven. An anomaly had appeared in the reincarnation vortex. After Guan's breakthrough, the reincarnation rules within the vortex had been constantly changing. He couldn't tell whether it was because of him or simply a coincidence. It was likely due to his traveling back and forth through the reincarnation vortex. He had caused a great upheaval in a universe's path, which in turn affected the reincarnation vortex. He wasn't worried, though. Even the greatest anomaly in the reincarnation vortex would hardly pose a threat to the Xian Yuan's Zai Xian. He speculated that beings from other universes would come to the great heavenly spirit land, which was undoubtedly a disaster for the great heaven and earth. While he was contemplating, an Xian arrived at his side. She mentioned Long Qing. The boy had been sitting still under the mystic pure tree for a month, and she was afraid he might go mad. "It's fine, it's not been that long. Sometimes it's good to think things through," Guan said casually. Long Qing was born in the Nirvana realm. Guan had merely sealed his cultivation level. Now, it seemed that Long Qing was rapidly growing stronger when, in fact, he was merely recovering his original strength. After hearing this, an Xian couldn't help but ask, "Master, how high is his potential, really? How does it compare to my senior and junior brothers?" Guan replied, "In terms of innate talent, he is stronger, but your senior brother has a sharper intuition." In Guan's eyes, what was truly terrifying about and how was his intuition? Not only did he cultivate quickly, but he also had an astonishing understanding of spells and divine skills. He had been imprisoned by the immortal dynasty but had not delayed his cultivation at all, and he was not far from reaching the Nirvana realm. He even anticipated the commotion and how it would cause in the immortal dynasty once he reached the Nirvana realm and looked forward to it. That amazing? An Xian widened her eyes in astonishment. Before Guan had revealed Long Qing's potential, she had always had sympathy for him. What use was physical strength without spiritual power? Then why? An Xian asked cautiously. Guan glanced at her and chuckled. "You're right, I'm intentionally forging him." Just as she thought. An Exian knew that Guan was an expert in the sealing technique. The blood prison great saint was an example, a mighty Mahayana being suppressed to such a state, and others were completely unaware of Guan's sealing methods. Suddenly, she felt relieved and said with a laugh, "This kid is already arrogant enough. Without restrictions, he could make a huge mess indeed." Guan looked up, noticing that the reincarnation vortex was changing, expanding rapidly. While an Exian was still pondering Long Qing's temperament, figures emerged from the reincarnation vortex, all humanoid but with demonic qi, ghostly energy, and demon energy. They quickly lined up, turning their gaze towards the great heavenly spirit land. Their cultivation levels were high. Although none were free immortals, the weakest among them were Tao Void mysterious immortals. Guan could sense that free immortals were rushing here from the reincarnation vortex. He couldn't help but calculate the major trends of the world, and the images of the future came into his vision. He saw some troubling scenes. Destiny, Guan thought to himself but outwardly nodded along with an Exian, talking about Long Qing. After a long while, an Exian bid her farewell and did not disturb Guan any further. Guan continued to watch outer heaven. He saw the Holy Court and the Immortal Dynasty dispatch a large number of cultivators to investigate. The three forces coexisted under the outer layer of light without clashing, at least for the time being. Further probing would be needed later on. Guan turned and flew towards the outer gate city. He was preparing to release the immortal cultivation version of Dream of the Red Chamber, following the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Many in the immortal cultivation world awaited Pan's fine work with anticipation. Writing was no longer a source of profit for Guan. Instead, he was more interested in sharing and reminiscing, passing down the works of earth literature to the immortal cultivation world to have beings remember for him. An ancient hour later, Guan left the book collection hall under the respectful farewell of its disciples. He decided not to leave the city immediately, choosing instead to continue wandering the streets. Strolling through the streets was also his hobby. By glimpsing the cause and effect of passers-by, he could further enhance his understanding of fate and destiny. As always, Guan would encounter acquaintances. Although his mindset had changed, his attitude towards others had not. He remained friendly and enthusiastic. Gradually, Guan arrived near the heavenly repair platform. From a distance, he saw many people gathered around the heaven-cutting axe. Even on the platform, there was a heaven and earth flying immortal, who concealed his cultivation and appeared very ordinary, unable to draw attention, at least on the heavenly repair platform. Zhuo Yijian stood steadfast beside the heaven-cutting axe, straight as a rod. Like a faithful devotee, he had not brought any benefit to Guan, but his dedication and perseverance moved him. After all, the stronger Zhuo Yijian became, the more he underscored the might of the sword Venerable Fudao. Guan stepped onto the heavenly repair platform, making his way through the crowd towards the heaven-cutting axe. Even on the platform, Guan would encounter acquaintances, necessitating some small talk. By the time he reached the heaven-cutting axe, half an incense stick's time had passed. Zhuo Yijian saw Guan and smiled, a rare sight on his stern face. He greeted Guan proactively, asking, "What brings you here today?" Guan replied, "I've been to the book collection hall." Zhuo Yijian's eyes lit up as he asked, "Could it be a new book?" He knew that Guan was the author of Investiture of the Gods, of which he was a dedicated reader. It was the work he read the most, but he also greatly enjoyed Journey to the West and Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Guan did not conceal anything and nodded in response, which thrilled Zhuo Yijian. At that moment, a cultivator who had been trying to pull out the heaven-cutting axe failed. He released his grip, stepped back 3 paces, and remarked with emotion, "The legacy of Sword Venerable Fudao truly is not easy to obtain, even I, a wandering immortal, could not succeed." Wandering immortal. A stir went through the crowd, and someone complained in a low voice, "Can this legacy really be obtained by someone?" As soon as these words were spoken, he faced criticism from those around him. "Couldn't you feel the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao when you were on the platform?" "That's right, even if you can't obtain Sword Venerable Fudao's legacy, at least you can experience his sword intent, which is a great honor. Sword Venerable Fudao is so formidable, if his legacy were obtained within a few hundred years, it wouldn't seem as precious." That just means the fated person hasn't arrived yet. I really look forward to that day. When it comes, the commotion caused by the heaven-cutting axe will surely shake heaven and earth. Guan listened to the discussions around him and reflected inwardly. Was he being too harsh? Without speaking of someone's talent to pull up the heaven-cutting axe, one must at least possess the cultivation level of a free immortal. Due to the appearance of the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, Guan had quietly strengthened the mana within the heaven-cutting axe, so none but a free immortal could shake the heaven-cutting axe. He had originally planned to ease the conditions when the destined one arrived, but as it stood, finding someone who met his criteria seemed difficult. Never mind, it was just as well if no one obtained it. A legacy that stands for 10,000 years, a million years, that would become legend, embodying even deeper foundations. Do you want to give it a try? Zhuo Yijin asked Guan. In the meantime, someone else approached and grabbed the axe handle of the heaven-cutting axe, but just like the person before, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move the heaven-cutting axe one bit. Most people who came to the heavenly repair platform were there to feel the power of Sword Venerable Fudao, and even if they failed, they had no regrets. As such, those who failed to obtain the legacy left with excitement. Forget it, what I really want to ask is, what are you seeking by staying here so long? Guan looked at Zhuo Yijin and asked with a smile on his face, as if making small talk. After hearing the question, Zhuo Yijin shook his head and said, "What can I seek? Being here allows me to comprehend the Sword Tao, and I am already content." Sword Tao, huh? Guan murmured, then cupped his hands and turned to leave. Zhuo Yijin saw Guan walk away in confusion and was about to speak when... Boom! A majestic sword intent rose from beneath his feet, engulfing his entire body and lifting his robes upwards, fluttering as if they would burst at any moment. Zhuo Yijin's face changed dramatically, his eyes filled with surprise and joy. His gaze followed Guan, who was walking away with his back toward him. All around, there was a sound of astonishment as everyone watched him in shock. Only Guan, turning his back on the crowd and not turning around, seemed out of place, as if he were in another dimension. Could it be? Zhuo Yijin's eyes widened. Guan had just inquired about his aspirations, and now he had received the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao. It couldn't be a coincidence. At that moment, Zhuo Yijin felt a familiar sword intent emanating from Guan. The sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao. And it was even stronger than his own. It could only be. Zhuo Yijin was shocked and excited. He felt no anger at being deceived by a junior, instead, he was pleasantly surprised. Because he liked investiture of the gods, he had always held a wonderful fantasy about Panon, and he had been saddened for a long time upon learning that Guan was Panon. Now, knowing Panon was Sword Venerable Fudao, how could he not be thrilled? He didn't believe Guan was a few hundred years old. He must be some old monster in disguise. The thought of how well he had treated Guan over the years filled him with a sense of excitement. Perhaps he had the chance to take Sword Venerable Fudao as his master. As he watched Guan walk in the opposite direction of the crowd, Zhuo Yijin was filled with infinite longing. Such capability, yet content to cultivate here, what an extraordinary state of mind. The cultivators from all sides marveled at Zhuo Yijin's fortune, as the vast sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao was directed only at him, clearly a reward. More and more disciples of the Supreme Sect appeared as if from nowhere, gathering atop the heavenly repair platform. They saw Zhuo Yijin enveloped in sword intent and couldn't help but feel delighted. Whoever received the guidance of Sword Venerable Fudao was a treasured asset for the Supreme Sect, and as a community of shared interests, how could they not rejoice? Rumbling, a suppressive roar echoed through the sky, causing all the creatures of heaven and earth to look up, but the cultivators on the heavenly repair platform were not concerned, assuming it was an anomaly caused by the sword intent of Sword Venerable Fudao. Walking through the crowd, Guan paused and looked up, his brow lifting. Is this power from the past? Guan thought curiously. His divine thought pierced through the sky, peering into the reincarnation vortex beyond. A powerful entity was descending, one that could directly threaten the safety of the great heavenly spirit land. Chapter 421, primordial immortal king. As the cultivator on the heavenly repair platform marveled at Zhui Yijian's fortune, the supreme sect sensed something amiss, for the oppressive might enveloping the heavens and the earth grew stronger. The snow filling the sky was becoming sparse, as if the harsh winter was about to end. In the third medicine valley, Shinxinzi, sitting under a tree, looked up with furrowed brows, beginning to calculate by counting on his fingers. Ji Xiaoyu stepped out from the house, looking up at the snowy heavens, her eyes reflecting the figure of a majestic stature. The sun and moon netherworld emperor appeared out of nowhere beside her, his expression solemn, and said, "The breath of an immortal king." Ji Xiaoyu turned to look at him, asking, "What is an immortal king?" She had regained many memories from her past life, but there were always gaps, hence, she could maintain the will of this life. An immortal king is a free immortal who has gathered the chief fortune of heaven and earth in oneself, having undergone reincarnation tribulation. Their mana is said to penetrate the heavens and be unmeasurable, said the sun and moon netherworld emperor, looking up with a serious expression on his face. He continued, "The aura of this immortal king is off, there's a strong scent of death." "What does that mean?" Ji Xiaoyu asked, her brows knitted. "I'm not sure, but one thing is certain, the great heavenly spirit land is facing a great disaster." The sun and moon netherworld emperor took a deep breath, his eyes flickering, seemingly deep in thought. After hearing this, Ji Xiaoyu shifted her gaze back to the sky, observing the strange phenomena above. The snow melted, the clouds churned, and the sky gradually darkened, the oppressive atmosphere between heaven and earth intensifying, making more and more beings feel uneasy. Guan watched for a while, then walked toward the edge of the heavenly repair platform. Zhui Yijian was still absorbing the sword intent refinement from sword venerable Fudao, his thoughts being drawn into a state of path enlightenment, forgetting about external matters. When Guan descended from the heavenly repair platform, the disciples of the outer gate city finally noticed the anomalies in the sky. At the same time, in outer heaven, in the void, figures knelt, facing the reincarnation vortex, which had grown larger than ever, with a majestic figure radiating light appearing faintly visible in the darkness at the center of the vortex. Before this figure, all the powerful figures under the reincarnation vortex seemed insignificant. The cultivators from the immortal dynasty and holy court who rushed here changed their expressions drastically at the sight of the figure in the reincarnation vortex. What is that? Such a terrifying aura, how high must his cultivation level be? Be careful, everyone, that figure is neither human nor demon, it must be an evil spirit. Could it be a heavenly demon? But why wouldn't they come from the silent destruction domain? Why do I feel this figure looks somewhat familiar, as if I've seen it somewhere before? As the two factions of beings discussed, they held their dharma treasures, ready for battle. The figures kneeling under the reincarnation vortex all looked up, their eyes intently fixed on the figure within the vortex, their expressions filled with fervor. Suddenly, an immortal spirit from the immortal dynasty burst out shouting, "The primordial immortal king!" At this utterance, the side of the immortal dynasty was in uproar, the immortal spirits greatly shocked, their gazes towards the reincarnation vortex filled with disbelief. On the side of the holy court, a few strong cultivators who had heard of the name of the primordial immortal king also showed a look of horror. All celestial ranks returned to the Holy Land. A commanding voice echoed in the void, and upon hearing it, the cultivators of the holy court turned around and left. Within 3 breaths, all the cultivators of the holy court had returned to the great heavenly spirit land. Seeing this, the immortal spirits became increasingly agitated. Is it truly the primordial immortal king? He's still alive. So Yuanshu ancestor created the reincarnation vortex to welcome the primordial immortal king. No, don't you feel that something is off about his aura? But that is the primordial immortal king, no matter what form he takes, he is forever the immortal king of our immortal dynasty. How many years has it been since the birth of the holy court? The immortal dynasty has not seen a true unifier of the world. The immortal spirits were overtaken with excitement, though a few showed worried expressions on their faces. Just then, the primordial immortal king within the reincarnation vortex began to move. He slowly emerged from the darkness, a terrifying aura reminiscent of an ancient demon god surging from the vortex, unstoppable like a river bursting its banks. The immortal spirits within the void fell silent, merely staring at him in shock. Holy Court, on a grand hall. The holy minister stood before the holy throne, looking up at the starry sky, his brow furrowed, and his gaze stern. Around him stood numerous figures, all second-rank celestial beings of the holy court, the holy gods. Each one a divine thought true immortal. An old woman dressed in a white-lit feathery robe spoke up, Holy Minister, the arrival of the primordial immortal king is surely directed at us. Regardless of why he has resurrected, we must devise a strategy. The other holy gods agreed, their demeanor calm but their words clearly filled with apprehension towards the primordial immortal king. With the primordial immortal king, the immortal dynasty now had 3 free immortals. In terms of top-tier strength, the holy court was now completely outclassed by the immortal dynasty. How could they not feel alarmed? Over the years, although the holy court had withstood the onslaughts of the immortal dynasty, anyone with clear sight could see that the holy court could not turn the tide and decisively defeat the immortal dynasty within a short period. Now with the emergence of the primordial immortal king, what would happen next was foreseeable. The holy minister, with a stern face, said, "What strategies do you propose, my lords?" Upon hearing this, the holy gods suddenly fell silent. Facing a free immortal, any plan was meaningless. Only a free immortal could confront another free immortal. One of the holy gods looked at the holy minister and asked, "When will you begin your breakthrough?" The holy minister had been preparing to break through to a free immortal status, but such a matter could not be rushed. It required ample preparation, and for the holy minister, this tribulation crossing was a life-or-death challenge, naturally not to be undertaken lightly. The holy minister looked at him and said, "If not for some people shirking their responsibilities, I might have already succeeded in my tribulation crossing. We are all contributing to the holy court. I don't know why some clutch onto their chi fortune so tightly, either in seclusion unable to act rashly, or having just released it, unable to retrieve it immediately." He wanted to leverage the entire chi fortune of the holy court for his breakthrough, but once chi fortune was linked with a person, it could not be withdrawn easily. Losing chi fortune would disturb the mind and bring ominous luck. This could not be forced and must be discussed thoroughly with the higher and lower echelons of the holy court, to draw out some of the chi fortune without causing the collapse of the holy court. Moreover, the holy court was still contending with the immortal dynasty. Faced with the holy minister's interrogation, that holy god turned pale and did not make a sound. Another holy god spoke up, "It's too late even for the holy minister to make a breakthrough now. What we need is a free immortal who can join the fight immediately." An old man with a wooden staff stroked his beard and asked, "Are you referring to Sword Venerable Fudao?" Silence descended upon the great hall, the holy gods then turning their gaze towards the holy minister, causing him to furrow his brow. The holy minister cursed inwardly. If Sword Venerable Fudao had been so easy to convince, he would have joined the holy court long ago. Knowing that Sword Venerable Fudao might possess the cultivation of a free immortal, while the holy minister was pleased and relieved, he was also wary. A free immortal who would not reveal his true identity, who wouldn't rethink their assumptions. Chapter 422 I give you a chance with a knife. As the holy minister hesitated, the primordial immortal king stepped out of the reincarnation vortex and presented his image before the immortal spirits. The primordial immortal king had a towering figure, his clothes worn and tattered, and the upper body was left with only strips of cloth drifting slightly. His long hair was spread over his shoulders, emitting a wild and fierce aura. His strands of hair, like the gray rivers of the wilderness, fluttered, stirring the clouds like dragons churning the river, causing the Tao spiritual energy around him to twist, forming a visual impact that could be seen with the naked eye. He seemed to come from ancient times, as if he had traveled from the source of the river of time, arriving at the great heavenly spirit land with an oppressive aura that stifled all creatures. The immortal spirits looked at him, their eyes filled with reverence and anticipation. Beneath the reincarnation vortex, figures radiated an aura similar to that of the primordial immortal king, silent and chilly. Seeing the primordial immortal king, they were not shocked but rather excited. They seemed to know what was about to happen and were ready to participate. Phew! The primordial immortal king slightly opened his mouth and exhaled a scorching breath, his eyes filled with bloodshot veins as his pupils gradually regained their luster. His gaze first fell upon the figures beneath the reincarnation vortex before shifting to the many immortal spirits in the distance. Facing his gaze, the immortal spirits still felt fear, with some instinctively stepping backward. Different from the primordial immortal king they imagined, this one radiated a dangerous presence, making them feel weird and horrified. Now, the primordial immortal king began to speak, his voice hoarse, making the void of outer heaven even more oppressive. He had not finished speaking when he suddenly opened his mouth and let out an enraged roar. This roar was earth-shattering. Every creature in the great heavenly spirit land heard it, even Tian Yaoer, Tian Qing, Tian Bai in the hidden spirit palace, and the deep-sea dragon carps in the Nianshu cave were frightened. It felt as if they were suddenly awakened from a dream, the roar of the primordial immortal king not just a sound wave but a soul impact. Hearing his roar, all beings felt fear, unable to calm themselves. Creatures on land saw the afterimage of the primordial immortal king in the sky, akin to a mirage, his enormous roaring figure casting an oppressive presence that made their hearts skip. At this moment, Guan stood on the streets of the outer gate city, the surrounding cultivators all looking up at the sky with expressions of dread. In front of Guan, the son of the demon emperor, Di Xie, was also looking at the sky, his brows furrowed. "What's that?" Di Xie murmured to himself. Guan remarked, "It looks like big trouble is coming." The two came across each other rarely, exchanging a few pleasantries before the roar of the primordial immortal king interrupted them. Originally, when the demon land invaded the land of the human race, Di Xie, the son of the demon emperor, sneaked into the supreme sect and had stayed for hundreds of years. Now, he had become one of the high-ranking individuals of the supreme sect, helping the cultivators of human race establish connections with the demons. At first, he and Guan got along very well. As time went by and their statuses diverged, they drifted apart. Taking a deep breath, Di Xie said, "Indeed." Then he looked down at Guan with a smile and said, "Don't worry. The supreme sect is now the safest place in the world." Guan nodded and continued their casual conversation. Perhaps because of the appearance of the primordial immortal king, Di Xie had the rare patience and started talking about the current strength of the supreme sect. Meanwhile, in the outer heaven, before the reincarnation vortex, the primordial immortal king stood suspended. He was no longer roaring, his arms hanging loosely. He suddenly looked in the direction of the immortal dynasty. When his gaze suddenly fell upon them, the immortal spirits couldn't help but tremble with fear. The primordial immortal king showed a fierce smile, his eyes narrowed, and in an instant, the entire void was filled with countless eyes of varying sizes, all belonging to the primordial immortal king. Each immortal spirit felt the horror of being watched by countless enemies. Before they could escape, the eyes in the void exploded open, and the immortal spirits' faces drastically changed. They were unable to speak, to run away, as their souls uncontrollably flew out of their bodies towards those eyes. This scene was incredibly eerie, causing the powerful beings who were using divine thought and divine sense to peek into the great heavenly spirit land to shudder in fear. The immortal dynasty did not send reinforcements and let these immortal spirits have their souls snatched away. Quickly, all those souls were absorbed by the eyes of the primordial immortal king, who then closed his eyes. The eyes spread throughout the void vanished all at once. When the primordial immortal king opened his eyes again, the blood in his eyes had disappeared, and the deathly aura around him had dissipated a lot. He looked more like a living spirit. He smiled again and blew a breath towards the corpses of those immortal spirits, and thousands of them turned into ash in an instant. "Welcome back, immortal king, from your exile in Xianyu." A mysterious man who flew out of the reincarnation vortex raised his head and shouted loudly. At his call, the other figures of the reincarnation repeated his words, and the name of the immortal king echoed through the cosmos. The primordial immortal king raised his right hand, and the great heavenly spirit land trembled slightly. The sea of clouds churned, as a patch of ocean suddenly exploded, with terrifying waves shooting up to the sky. A mysterious black object like a mountain surged from the seabed, scattering the clouds and swiftly flying towards the primordial immortal king. Boom! The primordial immortal king caught the incoming object with his right hand. a massive black saber with a handle as long as a mountain ridge, carved with mysterious patterns, the blade thick, seemingly unsharpened, completely black, emanating no aura. Viewed from this position toward the great heavenly spirit land, in the direction from which the black saber had come, the sea of clouds was spreading open to reveal a massive hole. Beneath the hole, a blue expanse was faintly visible, a crack appearing and widening. The gaze of the primordial immortal king fell upon the black saber in his hand, and he murmured to himself, "It's been a long time since I held you. I truly miss the days we fought side by side." Chapter 422 Giving you a chance with a knife _2 He lifted the black broadsword and swung it gently, stirring up the mana that shook the outer layers of the sky, and also caused the reincarnation vortex behind him to twist and ripple. This spectacle made the figures within the reincarnation even more excited, continuously shouting the name of the immortal king. There was a tumult in the sky, while the great heaven and earth was dead silent, as if all living beings were afraid of disturbing them. No one dared to come out, and even less dared to shout. The primordial immortal king raised the black broadsword high, completely releasing his own momentum. It was the momentum of someone standing at the pinnacle of the 9 heavens of the immortal path. Even the young Xian emperor had never shown such momentum. Far away in the immortal dynasty, the young Xian emperor stood atop the golden palace, gazing up at this scene, while the ancient immortal emperor appeared out of nowhere beside him, his face ashen. "Was this also part of your plan?" the ancient immortal emperor asked in a deep voice. The young Xian emperor, with an expressionless face, countered, "Would I resurrect another emperor of the immortal dynasty to replace myself?" After hearing this, the ancient immortal emperor furrowed his brows and asked in astonishment, "Then, who could it be?" The young Xian emperor said softly, "It seems that Yuanshu ancestor had another reason for opening reincarnation, and perhaps this was all part of the primordial immortal king's calculations." The immortal dynasty and the holy court were in turmoil, creating chaos in the heavenly secrets. His resurrection now might not be impossible. Upon hearing this, the ancient immortal emperor's eyes showed a hint of worry. The momentum of the primordial immortal king was indeed too strong, so powerful that even he, as a free immortal, felt a chill in his heart. How could he not worry? The most critical point was that following the resurrection of the primordial immortal king, it was not the holy court but their immortal dynasty's immortal spirits who were the first to suffer. This was a very dangerous signal. Could it be a plot by the holy court? But that shouldn't be. How could they achieve such a feat? The ancient immortal emperor muttered to himself. The young Xian emperor did not reply, but in his eyes, there was no sign of worry. Instead, there was a will to fight. Ever since he took the throne of the immortal dynasty, people have often compared him to previous immortal emperors, with the primordial immortal king, the founder of the immortal dynasty, being an existence he could never surpass. He had more than once imagined, if he and the primordial immortal king existed in the same era, who would have the last laugh? He was full of confidence in himself, even when facing the long unbeatable Xingtian. He was confident, for he was much younger than Xingtian. Even though the primordial immortal king's current momentum was strong, the young Xian emperor did not fear, his heart burning with fighting spirit. On another side, the holy court, currently discussing strategies, the holy ministers and holy gods were astonished that the primordial immortal king had actually annihilated that group of immortal spirits. What was going on? One of the holy gods looked towards the holy minister and couldn't help but ask, "Was this your arrangement?" The holy minister looked towards the sky, shook his head slightly, and said, "It has nothing to do with me. I fear that changes are about to arise." Upon hearing this, the holy gods became even more puzzled. They did not feel the delight but rather a sense of unease. Who, after all, was behind all this? In front of the reincarnation vortex, after the primordial immortal king felt the power of the black broadsword, his left hand reached towards his head. There is still something missing. The primordial immortal king muttered to himself, his gaze following to the great heavenly spirit land, his eyes fixing there, the corners of his mouth lifting, and then he vanished into thin air. The supreme sect, within the outer gate city. Guan was listening with great interest. With the information obtained from Di Xie's mouth, the supreme sect had indeed become powerful, even extending a vast network of relationships overseas. It all revolved around one person. Sword Venerable Fudao. Overseas powers, out of respect for Sword Venerable Fudao, responded very enthusiastically to the Supreme Sect's attempts at forging alliances, especially after Sword Venerable Fudao took action. This enthusiasm rose to a whole new level. Di Xia was about to recount last year's battle on Golden Scorpion Island, where the Supreme Sect had established no small reputation, proving that, even without Sword Venerable Fudao's intervention, their strength was formidable. Boom! A figure descended from the sky, crashing down onto the street behind Guan, sending stones flying, and cultivators nearby were blown away. Gu An's robe, too, was fluttered by the blast. Di Xia's pupils suddenly dilated. He immediately flashed behind Guan, shielding him. But the next second, he regretted it because he saw the true face of the Comer. It was the primordial immortal king. The roaring figure of the primordial immortal king was still imprinted in the sky, and the surrounding cultivators instinctively looked up and then back at the primordial immortal king. Whoosh! The cultivators scattered like a receding tide, with some even leaping up, flying towards the distance. Di Xia, however, stood rooted to the spot, his legs as if they were filled with lead, unable to move. He was afraid, but for some unfathomable reason, he did not run away. All he could hear were his heartbeat. The primordial immortal king looked emotionless as he stared at Guan. In front of him, both Di Xia and Guan seemed so insignificant, the disparity between their auras vast. Junior, do you know the origin of the crown you wear? Hearing the primordial immortal king's inquiry, Guan turned and looked at him, then pointed to his own immortal king crown and asked, could it be that this crown belongs to you? The primordial immortal king's lips curled up as he said, that's right, it's mine. This treasure was crafted by me when I stepped into the 9th level of the immortal path. It is called the immortal king crown, and it is capable of swallowing the chi blood of living beings, storing mana. 9th level of the immortal path. Immortal path supreme treasure. Upon hearing this, Di Xia nearly died of fright, with large beads of cold sweat covering his face. Such an entity, he had no power to resist it. Not just him, the entire Supreme Sect might face the danger of annihilation. He even began to resent Guan. How could you pick up such a crown with such a history? He had already been puzzled before, noticing that Gu An's immortal king crown had many notches, obviously meant for setting jewels, yet the fool hadn't done so because they simply wouldn't fit. Guan looked at the primordial immortal king and asked, so? You want it back? Cultivators in all directions watched tensely, and although the primordial immortal king was fearsome, this was the Supreme Sect, where many disciples bore the responsibility of protecting their sect. Hearing Gu An's words, they cursed inwardly. Has this kid gone mad? To actually provoke such a terrifying entity. The primordial immortal king narrowed his eyes, sizing up Guan. The primordial immortal king has become hostile toward you, wanting to grind you to dust. Would you like to use lifespan detection on him? Guan chose to probe conveniently. Primordial immortal king, 9 layers of the free immortal realm 0/0/0, all zeros. Not a living thing. Guan felt a pang of regret in his heart. The primordial immortal king was worth less to him than a chi cultivation realm cultivator right before his eyes. The primordial immortal king took a step forward, coming before Di Xia, whose pupils trembled violently, his body shaking as he was engulfed by shadow. Looking down at Di Xia, the primordial immortal king said coldly, "Mortal, you seek to block my path?" In the distance, figures appeared, all great cultivators of the Supreme Sect, including the 9-fingered divine Lord Enshin. They looked at the primordial immortal king, their hearts pounding with fear. Such a terrifying aura. Who exactly is this person? Di Xia was unrecognizable compared to his usual self, appearing so bedraggled. He wished to speak, even if just to beg for mercy, yet he couldn't muster the strength to do so. And it wasn't just him. Cultivators from the Supreme Sect all around remained silent as cicadas in winter, not daring to make a move. The fact that they chose not to flee already showcased their utmost courage. Kneel. The primordial immortal king's gaze turned stern, his voice thunderous like a roaring explosion, startling everyone to tremble. Xia turned pale with fright, his legs went weak, and he collapsed. But just as his knees were about to touch the ground, a hand from behind grabbed his arm, pulling him back up. It was Guan. While holding Xia, Guan looked towards the primordial immortal king. The nine-fingered divine lord, perched on a rooftop afar, was secretly shocked. Who in the world was this kid? Having a vivid memory of Guan's recent standoff with the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, he became curious about Guan, though he dared not inquire. Xia, gripped by Guan, inexplicably felt a sense of relief wash over him. He turned to look at Guan, wanting to say something, but upon seeing Guan's stern face, he found himself speechless. He was overwhelmed by Guan's demeanor. He couldn't help but feel an involuntary awe in his heart. The primordial immortal king looked at Guan, his eyes flashing with a strange light. He raised the black greatsword in his hand, holding it high above his head, ready to strike Guan. Be careful. A supreme sect disciple shouted out loud, having once been a disciple of the Third Medicine Valley, and forever grateful to Guan. Seeing Guan in danger, he instinctively warned him. That was all he could do. Guan slightly tilted his head, staring at the primordial immortal king, and said, "I'll give you one chance to strike, just one." Upon hearing this, a chill shot through the primordial immortal king's eyes. He twisted his wrist and savagely brought the sword down. Half kneeling, Xia looked up, his eyes obscured by the black sword, his face filled with despair. Boom! The sword struck down. The black greatsword instantly dissipated, and along with the primordial immortal king, it turned into ash. The terrifying surge of energy crushed the surrounding buildings, and even the clouds in the sky scattered. Guan stood his ground, expression unchanged, only his hair and robes fluttered ceaselessly, as if fierce flames were raging around him. Chapter 423 I am Sword Venerable Fudao. With the primordial immortal king turning to dust, the whole world seemed to suddenly quiet down. Supreme Sect's cultivators were all left staring at Guan, their eyes brimming with shock, while Xia, standing before Guan, was dumbfounded, his body rigid. The nine-fingered divine lord and Shinshinzi were also as still as wooden chickens, unable to believe their own eyes. Guan's face was expressionless, and there was a slight sense of regret in his heart. Could even a powerful free immortal not break through his protecting Tao divine essence? He did not strike back just now. The primordial immortal king was destroyed by his own power and the protecting Tao divine essence, both body and soul, completely obliterated. Regrettably, since the primordial immortal king was not a living being, Guan was unable to seize any lifespan. More and more figures appeared out of thin air, all of them great cultivators from the Supreme Sect. Looking at the street where Guan was standing, they all frowned as the strong presence of the primordial immortal king still lingered in the air. Looking at the mess on the street, they couldn't help imagining the recent tumult. Guan raised his right hand, streaks of black air appeared out of nowhere, burrowing into the center of his palm. He then casually put his hand into his sleeve, and nobody saw what it truly was. He looked down at Xia and asked, "Brother D, are you all right?" Xia came back to his senses. With Guan's help, he shakily stood up. Looking at Guan, all was difficult to hide in his eyes. Xia's lips quivered as he wanted to ask about Guan's identity but feared giving offense. Sword Venerable Fudao. A cry of shock came from afar. As the words were spoken, the quiet was broken, and noise rose from all around, rapidly turning into an uproar. Xia also guessed this. The primordial immortal king claimed to possess the 9 heavens of immortal path cultivation level. Who else could slay an entity with such mastery within the Supreme Sect, if not Sword Venerable Fudao? He turned out to be Sword Venerable Fudao. Xia looked at Guan, whose smile was mild. His Taoist heart could not calm down. Recalling the years of interaction with Guan, he felt ashamed and frightened. Thankfully, he had never looked down on Guan, as he had never been disrespectful in their exchanges. Guan couldn't hear his inner voice but could probably guess it. For Guan, it was just amusing, there was no feeling of being slapped in the face. He always enjoyed socializing and never demanded too much. A smile from others was already nice. There was no need to ask for more. Is he Sword Venerable Fudao? No, it's more likely that Sword Venerable Fudao protected him. Indeed, we didn't see him take action. It must have been Sword Venerable Fudao who acted. That man is Guan, the Valley Master of the Third Medicine Valley. Go, chess, and Gamoku were all invented by him. I know him, he definitely isn't Sword Venerable Fudao. I've also known him for hundreds of years. He is extremely kind-hearted. Perhaps he has met Sword Venerable Fudao, who is incognito, so Sword Venerable Fudao came to his aid. I wonder if that guy just now is dead. As more and more disciples began to talk, the tone quickly changed. With the voices of people familiar with Guan speaking up, many believed that it was Sword Venerable Fudao who had protected Guan, not that he was Sword Venerable Fudao himself. Of course, some still thought that Guan was Sword Venerable Fudao, because he was too composed in the face of the primordial immortal king. Even if he was not Sword Venerable Fudao, he must have a close relationship with him, otherwise, he could not be so fearless. LV Badian, Ji Hantian, Gu Zong, and other high-ranking members also appeared one after another. Upon seeing Guan, LV Badian breathed a sigh of relief. He gave Ji Hantian an instruction and then appeared beside Guan. Let's talk somewhere else, LV Badian said in a low voice, glancing at Di Xia with a look full of mystery. Guan nodded slightly, then followed LV Badian away. As Di Xia watched Gu An's retreating figure, he was about to speak when two figures appeared out of nowhere in front of him. Come with us, one of them said coldly. The oppressive feeling of the immortal path realm enveloped Di Xia, leaving him no choice but to comply. The street was quickly sealed off, the spectators were dispersed, the celestial phenomenon above and the remaining clouds gradually disappeared, and the snow continued to fall. Streams of shooting stars lit up the sky, figures emerging from the reincarnation vortex. They were descending into the great heavenly spirit land everywhere. Is it over? What happened? The ancient immortal emperor asked, furrowing his brows, still alone with the Yang Xian emperor in the great hall. Yang Xian emperor also sensed that the presence of the primordial immortal king had abruptly ceased. He pondered and said, probably Sword Venerable Fudao made a move. The place of the primordial immortal king's descent, Yang Xian emperor would not forget. That was a place that brought shame to the immortal dynasty. Slain by Sword Venerable Fudao, a powerful heavenly spirit, the immortal dynasty dared not seek revenge, a situation that naturally caused extreme dissatisfaction within its ranks, towards the higher-ups, and towards Yang Xian emperor. Although Yang Xian emperor was wary of Sword Venerable Fudao, he did not expect Sword Venerable Fudao to cause the momentum of the primordial immortal king to vanish so quickly. Taitsang continent. What exactly happened there? Yang Xian emperor suddenly wanted to take a trip there. At this moment, not only he but even the holy minister of the holy court wished to visit the supreme sect. Such a domineering primordial immortal king, it was not likely that he would have subdued his presence upon arrival. It was highly possible he had been suppressed. Sword Venerable Fudao, who exactly are you, a sacred being, and what is the purpose of hiding your identity? The holy minister sat on his sacred chair, his gaze deep in thought. The holy gods in the hall were also discussing the matter. The sudden disappearance of the aura of the primordial immortal king made them uneasy, regardless of the outcome. An hour later, Guan leisurely returned to the Third Medicine Valley. Just as he got back, he was surrounded by a throng of disciples. News about what had happened in the outer gate city spread rapidly. Gu An's name and that of Sword Venerable Fudao were widely circulated, though stories varied. However, one thing was certain, Guan was very likely related to Sword Venerable Fudao. The disciples had heard before that their master's cultivation level was extraordinary. Now hearing this, how could they not be excited? Facing their inquiries, Guan said helplessly, I must confess, I am Sword Venerable Fudao. I have always interacted with you in the guise of an ordinary valley master of Medicine Valley, but in return, you have not shown enough reverence for me. This intervention was unexpected. As soon as these words were uttered, they immediately provoked exclamations from the disciples. Yu Yingying in the crowd couldn't help but snort, what an act. She also harbored doubts in her heart. Previously, Shen Xinzi had wanted to kill her, but then suddenly stopped. Could it be related to Guan? Is Guan truly Sword Venerable Fudao? That should not be the case. She had heard from Xian Tianyi about his life story, and he was just over 700 years old now. At such an age, how could he be Sword Venerable Fudao? His flippant tone made it impossible for her to speculate wildly. Not just her, the other disciples also felt that way, always feeling that Guan seemed to be joking. Guan did not elaborate further, letting them guess. Was it true or false? Letting a bit of suspense remain in life was rather interesting. It's worth mentioning that previously, LV Badian had assured him that he would find a way to suppress this incident. LV Badian thought that Gu An's intervention was to protect the supreme sect. Of course, he had more reasons hidden in his heart. He feared the exposure of Sword Venerable Fudao's true identity, which was also the thought of the supreme sect's core leadership. If other powers learned of Sword Venerable Fudao's true identity, that would not be good. They were not afraid of Sword Venerable Fudao getting into trouble, but rather someone enticing him away. The Holy Court was the best example. Guan freed himself from the disciples' entanglement and went to his own loft, and then was properly blocked by Ji Xiaoyu. Was that commotion caused by you? Ji Xiaoyu asked. Guan shook his head and said, somebody fell from the sky, wanted to steal my crown, he was about to chop at me, then suddenly, he vanished. As he spoke, he patted his chest, showing a scared expression. Ji Xiaoyu, pensive, couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity with Gu An's description. Seeing her distracted, Guan didn't continue talking and entered alone. When Guan closed the door, Ji Xiaoyu was startled awake. She turned her head to look at the second-floor door, her eyes filled with disbelief. Could it be the Heaven and Earth Path gang? Even so, to think of extinguishing such an existence, Ji Xiaoyu was filled with shock, Guan becoming incredibly mysterious in her mind. As time passed, the incident at the outer gate city quickly spread, and even with the efforts of the supreme sect to suppress it, the name couldn't be stopped. Various powers heard of one name. Guan. After returning to his room, Guan took up the Green Hero Travelogue. He could feel that the followers of the primordial immortal king had all descended to the mortal world, and they were going to bring disaster. He had no interventionist ideas. Because this disaster would cause the immortal dynasty and the Holy Court to temporarily cease hostilities, which was actually a good thing. The immortal dynasty and Holy Court's war affected even more creatures. Moreover, with Gu An's current insight into the laws of fate and karma, he could see farther calamities. No matter how he intervened, the fate of the great heavenly spirit land would never disappear permanently. There is birth and death, fortune and misfortune. These are the laws of all things in great heaven and earth. After the extinguishing of the primordial immortal king, the winter snow fell even heavier. In the following days, more and more people came to the Third Medicine Valley for go games and visits to see Guan. Guan didn't meet with strangers. He continued to linger in his various medicine valleys, harvesting medicinal herbs. When he went to the Nianshu cave, Tian Yaoer and the other two girls inquired about the roaring of the primordial immortal king. He comforted them briefly and then began to give them guidance in their cultivation. Life was quite busy. Apart from picking medicinal herbs, Guan also had to teach Tian Yaoer, Tian Qing, Tian Bai, and an Xian. Aside from that, he had to take time to cultivate and nurture his body. In the blink of an eye, the Spring Festival arrived. On the morning of the Spring Festival, Guan made a trip to the inner sect city, drinking with Wu Ju at an inn while listening to a storyteller talk about overseas matters. That immortal Lord Qin is said to be an ancient great power from 10 million years ago, resurrected from reincarnation, needing to devour the souls of countless immortal cultivators to reconstruct his body. The storyteller's tone was filled with emotional provocation. Even Guan and Wu Ju were captivated by his words. Wu Ju turned his head to look at Guan, curiously asking, "What exactly is your relationship with Sword Venerable Fudao?" Guan glanced at him and said, "I am Sword Venerable Fudao." "What do you mean by what relation?" "How could that be? I've watched you grow from the foundation establishment realm to today. If you are Sword Venerable Fudao, then I must be the Yangxian Emperor. Wu Ju exclaimed with wide eyes. Gu An's gaze followed to the stairway entrance. Someone was coming up. Yangxian Emperor, Free Immortal Realm Level 16908. 922/50 000/100 Chapter 424, Giving Face to Seniors Over 6 Million Years Old, a Free Immortal. A lifespan of 50 million years. The ultimate lifespan of 100 million years. Truly worthy of being the current lord of the immortal dynasty. Guan looked at Yangxian Emperor and felt deeply moved as these numbers demonstrated the emperor's formidable power. Wu Ju continued to refer to himself as the Yangxian Emperor, oblivious to the true Yangxian Emperor approaching. The Yangxian Emperor, dressed in a purple robe with a handsome face, exuded a transcendent aura even without donning the golden robe and crown of an immortal emperor. His eyes were particularly bright and piercing, his brows hardly concealing his pride. The arrogance nurtured over millions of years made him unforgettable at a glance. The Yangxian Emperor did not glance around the second floor, his gaze fixed directly on Guan. He walked towards Guan, reaching Wu Ju's side, and upon hearing the name Yangxian Emperor mentioned, he remained unperturbed. Looking at Guan, he extended his hand in greeting and said, "Daoist friend, may I sit and chat with you?" Guan glanced at him and nodded slightly, following which the Yangxian Emperor sat down. Wu Ju observed the Yangxian Emperor, sensing an extraordinary poise in him. "Do you know each other?" Wu Ju curiously asked, aware of Gu An's strong networking skills and friendships across the Supreme Sect, which he greatly admired. Before displaying his talent, he had not one friend. Guan replied, "We do not know each other, but to meet is fate, is it not?" Upon hearing this, the Yangxian Emperor smiled and nodded in agreement. Guan waved his right hand, and a jug of wine rose up, settling gently in front of the Yangxian Emperor. "Drink this jug of wine, and see if you would like to be friends with us," Guan said nonchalantly. Previously when Shi Immortal Lord had come to trouble him, even if not arranged by the Yangxian Emperor, as the Lord of the Immortal Dynasty, he couldn't disassociate from the causal relations. The Yangxian Emperor narrowed his eyes upon hearing this. Naturally, he wasn't going to drink the wine, but Gu An's intention was to constrain him. Facing Guan, he could only discern that Gu An's cultivation level was in the nascent soul realm, unable to spot any loopholes. If Guan truly was Sword Venerable Fudao, their gap in cultivation level was undoubtedly enormous. He hesitated for a moment before opening the jug and lifting it, beginning to drink heartily. Wu Ju looked skeptically between Guan and the Yangxian Emperor, witnessing for the first time Guan putting someone in a difficult position. Who is this person? Could he be a scion of a family that had offended Guan? The Yangxian Emperor drank swiftly, and once he set down the jug, Guan picked up a new one and began drinking alone. Seeing this, any trace of discomfort in the Yangxian Emperor's heart instantly dissipated, a smile appearing on his face. Adversaries should resolve and not agitate conflicts. He and Sword Venerable Fudao had no direct enmity. Shi Immortal Lord had acted rashly. Although this incident had cost him face, Sword Venerable's power was enough for him to concede some face. Though he was proud and considered his talent unparalleled in the world, he was only several million years old, and beings like Sword Venerable Fudao had likely lived tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of years. He should yield some respect to his predecessor. After finishing his drink, Guan put down the jug and started making casual conversation with the Yangxian Emperor. The two tactfully avoided revealing their true identities, acting as if genuinely curious about each other. Wu Ju joined in, guided by Guan, and they returned to discussing the Yangxian Emperor. Wu Ju admired the Yangxian Emperor, who had faced interventions from the Holy Court during his tribulation crossing and had boldly initiated war. Perhaps it was a calculated move, but it was done openly, which he liked about the Yangxian Emperor. For some reason, Guan felt like he was being scolded. "Little bastard, who says he isn't straightforward and honorable?" The Yangxian Emperor, however, was all smiles, finding Wuju more and more agreeable. The three drank and chatted, growing familiar with one another, when Guan sighed, "I feel like we were born in the wrong era. Why does it seem like our generation always faces endless tribulations?" Wuju nodded, sharing the sentiment. The young Xian emperor said, "Every generation feels like this, remembering only the hardships. But such is life, continuously experiencing trials." He thought Sword Venerable Fudao was hinting at him and felt compelled to explain. With the immortal dynasty and holy court vying for power, the world seems embroiled in great turmoil, but in fact, friction between the two powers had always existed. To the major sects, the past might have seemed peaceful, but for the common people, every century brought various hardships. It is said when immortals fight, mortals suffer, and the battles between immortal path cultivators also bring disasters to mortals. Our very reason for pursuing immortal cultivation is to withstand the incessant trials that follow, the young Xian emperor earnestly stated, clearly implying that the turmoil between the immortal dynasty and holy court affected the world's structure, yet for ordinary beings, it's just a change in who causes their sufferings. Life is always filled with suffering, a common worldly norm. Wuju felt this made sense, and remarked thoughtfully, "Who knows how long this tribulation will last? It always feels like it will be difficult to end within 100 or even 1,000 years. Of course, because this great heaven and earth is too vast, far beyond your imagination." In ancient times, when the primordial immortal king unified the great heaven and earth, it took 1,000,000 years. When the holy court rose and swept across the world, pushing back the immortal dynasty, it took 3,000,000 years. The battles of heaven and earth are beyond mortal comprehension, the young Xian emperor replied, nodding. This response made Wuju look at him quizzically. This person seems very knowledgeable. What is his origin? Suddenly, Guan asked, "Do you think in the struggle between the immortal dynasty and holy court, they might both end up weakened, leading to a new ruling power in the great heaven and earth?" Young Xian emperor's expression suddenly turned unnatural, and his gaze toward Guan became complex. Wuju frowned and said, "That's not possible, right? Is there any other sect that can compare with them?" "Now there isn't, but what about in 10,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 years?" Guan shook his head. He paused, then added, "Besides, I've heard that strong beings always descend from outer heaven, and even heavenly demons reincarnate in the mortal world. Couldn't they be preparing their own forces?" Wuju frowned, thinking there was reason in Guan's words. Young Xian emperor's complexion returned to normal. It turned out Sword Venerable Fudao was reminding him of threats from outer heaven. He was actually worried that Sword Venerable Fudao was going to support Supreme Sect. In fact, without Guan's mention, he had always been worried. The primordial immortal king was the best example. Though a fallen spirit of the immortal dynasty, he knew nothing about it. He even felt that there were unknown forces stirring within the immortal dynasty. He couldn't help but think back to those immortal spirits who had supported him in starting the war, each one of them seeming suspicious. The storyteller's voice continued to spread, but the trio's conversation didn't attract anyone else's attention because the inn was filled with people boasting. However, after drinking for nearly an hour, new guests arrived, recognized Guan, and enthusiastically engaged him in conversation. Since the battle initiated by the primordial immortal king, many knew of the close relationship between Guan and Sword Venerable Fudao. Young Xian Emperor watched Guan interacting with the lowly cultivators and suddenly had a realization. This man was terrifyingly strong, yet he could lower himself to mingle with mortals without them noticing a thing. His Taoist heart was unfathomable. Of course, he didn't think much of this approach since he believed more in the supremacy of the strong. The weak should merely serve as foils to the strong. An hour later, Guan and his companions left the inn, and Guan invited Yang Xian Emperor to spend the spring festival in Third Medicine Valley. Yang Xian Emperor did not refuse. He also had more to discuss with Guan. Both returned to the Third Medicine Valley. Upon arriving, Yang Xian Emperor's gaze became complicated. Divine thought true immortal. Reincarnation tribulation aura. And mortals with strong chi blood and not a trace of spiritual power. He even saw 2 reincarnated heavenly demons. Something was off about this valley. The third Medicine Valley was festively decorated. Even Ji Xiaoyu and the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, who rarely shunned cultivation, were playing chess with disciples everywhere. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor turned his head toward Guan. His pupils contracted sharply on seeing Yang Xian Emperor. His first instinct was to flee, but then remembering Gu An's strength, he reassured himself. Guan would protect him. There was no need to be afraid here. Would Yang Xian Emperor dare oppose Sword Venerable Fudao? That day, the aura of the primordial immortal king was overwhelmingly strong, yet he was reduced to ashes before Sword Venerable Fudao. From that day on, Guan was regarded by the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor as the most powerful being in the great heavenly spirit land. He even suspected Guan was Xingtian. Apart from Xingtian, who else in the great heavenly spirit land could be so powerful? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor diverted his gaze and continued to play chess with the nine-fingered Divine Lord, who was visibly upset and indecisive in his moves. Guan walked further into Medicine Valley, introducing the situation of the third Medicine Valley to Yang Xian Emperor. Yang Xian Emperor grew interested in the third Medicine Valley. Subsequently, Guan asked Long Qing to entertain Yang Xian Emperor. He had himself to meet Shenzhen. Shenzhen was messing around in his bookshelf again. Ever since learning about Gu An's strength, Long Qing had taken very seriously any tasks given by Guan. This was his chance to perform. He was very enthusiastic with Yang Xian Emperor, who found him quite interesting as well. Not sure why, Yang Xian Emperor felt that Long Qing seemed familiar, as if he had met him in a previous life. He guessed that he might have encountered Long Qing's past life. However, this was Sword Venerable Fudao's territory, and Long Qing addressed him as master, so Yang Xian Emperor wouldn't dare act recklessly. As dusk approached, all disciples gathered in the loft area. Some sat drinking, others stood arm in arm, and yet others were sparring to enhance the festive mood, keeping the atmosphere lively. Yang Xian Emperor's attention was on Guan. He saw Guan surrounded by Shenzhen, Zhenqin, Yilan, Ji Xiaoyu, and an Xian, with Shenzhen and Zhenqin directly beside him, sparring verbally. Zhenqin was nearly putting her feet on the table. This gave Yang Xian Emperor a deeper understanding of Sword Venerable Fudao. This man truly was a hidden hermit. Yilan watched Zhenqin verbally sparring with Shenzhen, a smile on her face. Not that she found Zhenqin's actions appropriate, she simply enjoyed the atmosphere. It was different from the subsect where people revered her, making her feel as though she had returned to Mystic Valley 700 years ago. After so many years, how could recalling the original intentions not be wonderful? Ji Xiaoyu watched Guan intently. He could see the displeasure in her eyes. What could he do? Everyone insisted on coming to Third Medicine Valley to celebrate the festival with him. It was unstoppable. At least Jiang Qiong was better, waiting for him in the 8 scenic caves. How good it was to interact privately. More crowds always lead to trouble. Chapter 425 Xianyu Divine Dynasty, Sky Demon Great Sect. After the festival, Guan went to Mystic Valley on his own. He wasn't worried about Yang Xian Emperor causing trouble in the Third Medicine Valley. If Yang Xian Emperor dared to entertain such thoughts, Guan could make him disappear in an instant, even erasing all his karma, making all beings forget the Yang Xian Emperor ever existed. When Xingtian and Jiang Shi saw Guan, they were extremely excited. Guan had initially planned to just go through the motions, but he didn't expect them to be so thrilled. Thus, Guan let the two of them demonstrate their recent cultivation results, then gave them guidance one by one, to their immense surprise and delight. After fussing around for an ancient hour, Guan finally entered the 8 scenic caves. He emerged from the grotto and in the distance, he saw the immense green vine tree, with a young woman in green, swinging under it. It was Jiang Qiong. She was barefoot, with no jewelry on her hands, her long hair casually draped over her shoulders, exuding an aura of pure innocence, unlike her past demeanor as the demon cultivator of the Thousand Autumn Pavilion. She turned her head, and upon seeing Guan approaching, she couldn't help but snort coldly. As Guan drew near, Jiang Qiong couldn't resist mocking. Where were you indulging yourself last night? Guan didn't indulge her, and replied gruffly, do you need something from me? Aren't you the sect master of Juhua sect? I heard your sect also celebrates the spring festival, shouldn't you be overseeing everything? What's there to oversee? I've raised so many people, it's time I took a break, huffed Jiang Qiong. She stood up, her feet pressing into the grass. Her eyes gleaming, she suddenly lifted her right foot, trying to brush the grass off onto Guan, but he dodged it. So I've heard you calling yourself Sword Venerable Fudao. Jiang Qiong watched Guan closely, her eyes sparkling. She had intended to catch him off guard, yet Guan had still avoided it. This kid really was no ordinary person. Guan kept his distance and countered, indeed, what about it? Jiang Qiong obviously didn't believe it, because Sword Venerable Fudao had personally told her that Guan was his disciple. She only felt their master-disciple relationship was quite strong. It seems Sword Venerable Fudao is ready to take action, putting you in front, you should be careful. Even with him backing you up, beware of hidden attacks. When dealing with others, try not to be too impulsive, Jiang Qiong cautioned. Guan helplessly responded, please, do I need you to teach me in this area? Who was it that got kicked out of the Taizong dynasty on the spot? Jiang Qiong was immediately displeased and started chasing after Guan, but no matter how she tried, she couldn't catch up. She got serious, chasing Guan at full speed, while he continued to evade her. As the chase went on, Jiang Qiong fell into a profound state, seeing Guan as a series of shadows in her eyes. His figure and step technique seemed so agile and enticing. Who knows how much time had passed? Jiang Qiong suddenly snapped awake to find herself under the green vine tree, while Guan was in front of her, practicing alchemy. She took a deep breath and asked, what was that just now? A step technique. Once mastered, you could be unrivaled in the world, Guan answered casually without turning around. What he had taught was the eternal measuring heaven Dao step, an advanced version of the stepping path of age's step. Aside from himself, no one else had learned it yet. Towards Yilan and Jinqin, Guan could only encourage them to pursue their cultivation level as far as possible, and to cultivate other Daoist sorceries only after reaching nirvana. Jiang Qiong was different. Her maximum lifespan was over 5,000 years, she would certainly achieve nirvana, so learning divine skills in advance wouldn't delay her cultivation. What's it called? Jiang Qiong asked curiously, certain such a precise step technique had to be an inheritance from Sword Venerable Fudao. Guan glanced at her and said, Eternal Measuring Heaven Dao Step. Don't spread it around, or it'll bring big trouble, and I mean trouble from beyond this world. Upon hearing this, Jiang Qiong became both nervous and excited. She eagerly pounced towards Guan. She hugged Guan tightly, wanting to plant a kiss on his face, but was blocked by his palm. Instead, she ended up kissing his palm, tickling him. I haven't loved you for nothing, rest assured, I will definitely succeed. Jiang Qiong said joyfully. Guan pushed her away and said, then you'd better start practicing now. To master this divine skill, I'm afraid it might take 1,000 or even 10,000 years. Jiang Qiong didn't believe it and immediately got up to begin her cultivation. Guan turned his gaze back to the pill furnace. Below the pill furnace, the flames flickered, burning out only to reignite, continuously cycling through a state of reincarnation. With time flying like an arrow, Guan once again seated himself in front of the pill furnace, kindled the fire, and turned his head to look. Jiang Qiong's figure shifted about, resembling a white swan, elusive and difficult to track. She suddenly appeared beside Guan, her right hand to her forehead, followed by a fall, her hands clasping Guan's upper body, resting her head on his shoulder. Why, after 100 years of practice, can I still not even enter the threshold? Jiang Qiong said in anguish. It had been a century since she had received the eternal measuring heaven Dao step, and over the years, she diligently cultivated but failed to grasp it, so she came to Guan for advice. She had just demonstrated it, and with her mystic heart realm cultivation level, she couldn't even take 20 steps. Guan remained leaned upon and said, I've told you before, this divine skill isn't so simple to master. The fact that you can take so many steps already proves your diligence. Jiang Qiong sighed, dispirited. After resting for a while, she brought up worldly affairs. The reincarnation shadows brought by the primordial immortal king wreaked havoc everywhere in the mortal world, and they were given a unified name, Xianyu Wraiths. A century had passed, and rather than being eradicated, the Xianyu Wraiths had grown stronger and had even established the Xianyu Divine Dynasty. Apart from the Xianyu Divine Dynasty, a sect named the Sky Demon Great Sect appeared in the mortal world, supposedly all reincarnations of heavenly demons. While the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court were struggling against each other, they spared efforts to confront the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect. Not only did they not succeed, but they also suffered repeated defeats, allowing the enemies to gain tremendous momentum. Now, the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court had begun to cease their wars, turning their spears towards the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect, and the mortal world faced new uncertainties. The Taizong continent remained unaffected, but its sects saw this as an opportunity to vie for resources. Outside their realm, Sword Venerable Fudao would not protect them, nor would overseas powers indulge them. The Juhua sect was one among these, constantly expanding their reach. Last year, they encountered a demon of the Sky Demon Great Sect and lost tens of thousands of disciples in the fray. This incident enraged the Juhua sect, but the power gap made them wary of seeking revenge. Jiang Qiong was telling Guan all this not to seek help, but just to discuss the outside situation, and Guan had no intention of intervening. Over the years, the reincarnation vortex continually spawned Xianyu Wraiths, bolstering the strength of the Xianyu Divine Dynasty. Certainly, there were great karmic forces at play behind this. Who knows if the Immortal Dynasty and Holy Court have really reconciled? They would do well to join forces and expel these two powers, otherwise, the consequences are unthinkable, Jiang Qiong said worriedly. Guan, while refining an elixir, replied, "Don't worry, I will talk to the Yangxian Emperor." Jiang Qiong blinked in surprise and asked, "Are you talking about the sovereign of the Immortal Dynasty?" "Yes, what about it?" "You're bluffing, making it sound as if you can meet him just like that." "You think I can't?" "Even if you have Sword Venerable Fudao as your mentor, he's far away in the Immortal Dynasty." "Heh, it'll take you to meet him today. Why don't you ask him yourself, okay?" Guan rolled his eyes at Jiang Qiong, speaking in a mocking tone. She dared to look down on him. He was no longer the Ji family house servant of yesteryear. He had to show this woman some of his true power. Chapter 426. The Orthodox of Heaven and Earth. Guan brought Jiang Qiong to the Third Medicine Valley, and they made their way to the dojo. Along the way, Jiang Qiong looked around curiously, intrigued by the current state of the Third Medicine Valley. Since the news about Gu An's connection with Sword Venerable Fudao had spread, more people had been coming to the Third Medicine Valley, and the Supreme Sect had expanded it, continuously increasing the number of disciples in the valley. Now, the number of Medicine Valley disciples had surpassed 4,000. At first glance, the Third Medicine Valley seemed like a sect. Jiang Qiong sensed many cultivators with a stronger presence than herself, which made her even more curious about Gu An's current status. Guan approached a senior disciple from behind and tapped him on the shoulder, signaling him to leave. The senior disciple, upon seeing him, immediately felt relieved, quickly stood up to salute, then hurried away. Guan sat down and looked across at the Yangxian Emperor, asking, "You've been here for 100 years, aren't you going back?" Jiang Qiong stood next to Guan, casting a strange look towards Yangxian Emperor. Could it be that the Emperor of the Immortal Dynasty was him? Although the Yangxian Emperor had concealed his cultivation level, the sheer grandeur he emanated was extraordinary. Yangxian Emperor looked at Guan and smilingly asked, "Go back for what?" "Comprehending the great Tao here is quite good." He had been in Third Medicine Valley for 100 years. Initially, he was curious why Sword Venerable Fudao would choose to stay hidden in such a modest place, but gradually, he was attracted to the lifestyle here. The disciples working, cultivating, falling in love, their every action symbolized the laws of the great heaven and earth. Everything in this Medicine Valley seemed to contain some aspect of the Taoist intent. His feelings were not a mere illusion but were influenced by Gu An's Tao fruit in the surroundings. The so-called Tao fruit is also a pathway of Tao, representing the fruits of chasing the Tao by living beings. Even though Guan had concealed his cultivation level, the aura of Xianyuan's Zai Xian still prevailed, and his Xianyuan Tao fruit also influenced everything around him. This was why the Medicine Valley disciples' cultivation speed was increasing, with geniuses emerging almost every year. These geniuses might not stand out in today's supreme sect but would have been famous 800 years ago and heavily nurtured by the sect. Guan was also aware of his own impact on the surroundings, unable to control it. He only opted to feign ignorance, kind of a care towards the people around. Now that the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect have emerged, the threat to the Immortal Dynasty, the Holy Court, and even the whole world is not small, Guan stated, then glanced at Jiang Qiong. You are normally quite talkative, why the silence now? Jiang Qiong was skeptical and didn't just blurt out anything, plus she never really intended to seek out the Yang Xian Emperor, she just wanted a topic to discuss with Guan. Yang Xian Emperor replied, the world is in chaos, it's normal for variables to emerge, let them be. He watched Guan make his move on the board, his gaze subtly changing. He was about to win this game, but with Guan's move, the situation on the board shifted. Though it wasn't a resurrection from death, it made him sense danger. It seems the Immortal Dynasty is not shouldering the mission of all living beings, rather pursuing the victory of the major trends, Guan muttered with a slight smile. Yang Xian Emperor perceived the implications in his words. He didn't avoid them but rather said, in different periods, the targets pursued will vary. Whether it's the Immortal Dynasty or the Holy Court, when they first rose, they surely won the hearts of the people and shouldered the mission of protecting all living beings. But once you unify the world and become the Lord of all, you will become the common enemy of all beings in misery. There's no power in this world that can satisfy all living beings. From my perspective, the Immortal Dynasty should pursue other things, like the legitimacy of the great heavenly spirit land. Guan remembered the Immortal Dynasty's spirits once said that the Holy Court was established by beings from outer heaven. For the Immortal Dynasty, no matter how well the Holy Court did, they wanted to overturn it, as it concerned the honor and disgrace of the Immortal Dynasty. Some things are more important than peace. After hearing this, Guan made no comment. Different stances naturally lead to different perspectives on matters. Since Yang Xian Emperor was already aware of the chaos in the outside world, that was sufficient. In Guan's eyes, both the Immortal Dynasty and the Holy Court were headed towards destruction. He could see far into the future, everything has its destiny, including the current supreme sect he was in. Guan had no intention of making the supreme sect last forever, knowing that one day, as old friends departed, the sect would lose its significance to him. Without the supreme sect, he could still flourish elsewhere. He wasn't worried at all. The deeper he delved into causality and fate, the fewer burdens Guan felt. Of course, Guan did not resist this change in mentality. To live in this world, one should not be entangled by too many emotions and unnecessary worries. Jiang Qiong also pondered the words of Yang Xian Emperor, curious about what he meant by the legitimacy of heaven and earth. Guan didn't linger, the current game couldn't be saved, his moves were just for play. He stood up and took Jiang Qiong to leave. Yang Xian Emperor watched the few ingenious moves made by Guan, contemplative. A breeze swept into the Medicine Valley, lifting leaves that swirled towards the sky. Spring had departed and summer arrived, warming the lands of great heaven and earth. On this day, Guan rode the blood prison Great Saint, bringing an exile to immortal-seeking island. The island master, Sun Hanfeng, personally greeted him, and soon, Hu Shaojian arrived too. With Guan's support, Hu Shaojian, now a cultivator of the void-crossing realm, despite years having passed and their relationship deepening, struggled to hide his excitement and joy in front of Guan, making it difficult for Guan to discern if it was an act. Guan asked Hu Shaojian to take an exile and the blood prison Great Saint for a stroll, while he discussed matters privately with Sun Hanfeng. With them gone, Sun Hanfeng finally said, Master, demon cultivators from the Sky Demon Great Sect have been infiltrating Immortal-seeking Island frequently lately, I sense trouble brewing. Only places like the Taitsang continent, protected by mighty beings, were relatively safe. Immortal-seeking Island, despite its strong foundations, inevitably attracted covetous eyes. Guan had foreseen a tribulation awaiting immortal Seeking Island, which was why he had chosen to come. Do not worry, just manage the island calmly, no one will disturb immortal Seeking Island, Guan, holding his teacup, replied softly while blowing on the steam. Hearing this, Sun Hanfeng smiled. He was a disciple of Mortal World Peak, arranged by Guan to oversee immortal Seeking Island, and treated well by Guan. The benefits he reaped each year were not small, and now he truly valued immortal Seeking Island, not wanting mishaps to befall it. Shortly after, Sun Hanfeng brought up various other issues, mostly regarding internal disputes or power struggles on the island. Guan spent most of the time listening, and when Sun Hanfeng asked for advice, he did not hold back his opinions. When Sun Hanfeng finished, Guan gestured for him to leave. After Sun Hanfeng departed, Guan remained seated, looking out toward the blue sky, his gaze reaching beyond the heavens and earth. He was looking at an old friend. Tattered clouds hung like torn fabric across the sky, and figures exuding demonic qi hovered in midair. Among them, one with the most intense demonic qi had a giant red fireball and deep red chains wriggling like snakes behind him. Their eyes were all fixated on a ruined and solitary island below, where trees were toppled and the ground upheaved, creating a pockmarked landscape. Dressed in black, Leah stood atop a pile of rubble, with a sword in his right hand and divine exotic city in his left, while divine exotic immortal spirit perched on his shoulder. Zhao Shueha, is that all the capacity you have? Capturing me won't be that easy, Leah taunted loudly, a cold expression between his brows. Zhao Shueha stood in front of the red fireball, toying with the chains around him, an indifferent expression on his face, as he looked down at Leah. Leah, how long can you last relying on the power of divine exotic city? Join the Sky Demon Great Sect. Holy Court is not for you. You must sense the weariness of Holy Court. Without Xingtian, the chaos in Holy Court holds no merit for nurturing you. Leah frowned slightly upon hearing this. He had been in the holy position within Holy Court for many years but had not reaped significant benefits. Recently, the chief fortune of his position was extracted, making his cultivation unstable. He had no choice but to venture out, partly to clear his mind. As Zhao Shueha raised his right hand towards the sky, he said, the sect hierarch of Sky Demon Great Sect has yet to arrive here. When he does, he will transform this realm. There's not much time left for you. If you don't leave Holy Court soon, you'll perish along with it. Leah, frustrated, retorted, so? Is living a lowly life really better than death? At this, a fierce light flashed in Zhao Zuhi's eyes. Leah said no more and tossed divine exotic city upwards. Quickly enlarging, it enveloped the whole island, emitting black mist from which divine souls and peculiar ghosts emerged, even revealing a colossal figure wielding an axe, instantly suppressing the momentum of the Sky Demon Great Sect side. Divine exotic immortal spirit stood on Li Ya's shoulder, howling as if taunting the enemy. Zhao Shueha huffed coldly, placing his right hand to his mouth, beginning to chant a spell. As he chanted, his own mana surged out, entering the red fireball behind him, which spouted explosions of intense flames and weird black spots wriggling on its surface. Just as the ghostly army burst forth from divine exotic city, the red fireball suddenly opened a chilling eye, freezing the whole realm as everything came to a standstill. While sipping tea, Guan observed that the Sky Demon Great Sect indeed possessed something powerful, utilizing the power of the silent destruction domain. He secretly passed mana to divine exotic immortal spirit. The stronger it became, the stronger divine exotic city would be, leading both parties into a stalemate. He had noticed some mighty beings stirring within the silent destruction domain, eyeing the great heavenly spirit land. These entities only dared to peer and feared to step into great heaven and earth. This disappointed Guan. The Sky Demon Great Sect borrowed the power of the silent destruction domain, while Xianyu Divine Dynasty tapped into the power of the reincarnation vortex. Both forces still tested the waters, uncertain whether they feared him or Xingtian. Guan indeed looked forward to their descent. If they provoked him, it would be the perfect time to harvest lifespans. Time swiftly passed. After battling for 2 ancient hours, Leah had escaped the encirclement, barely surviving this tribulation. However, Guan foresaw that Leah would be entangled in vendettas for many years to come. Senior brother Li, the next millennium won't be easy for you, Guan murmured to himself, then stood up and walked outside the hall. Chapter 427, Divine Emperor's Descent. Autumn breezes wafted through Mystic Valley. Guan sat on a tree branch, looking down at the sparring in the forest below. Jiang Shi and Xingtian were engaged in a close contest of martial moves and movement techniques, the master and disciple evenly matched. Jiang Shi possessed a maximum lifespan of 4,800 years, while Xingtian's lifespan could reach 5,000 years. Talent-wise, there wasn't a large gap between the two. After many years of cultivation, Xingtian had grown significantly. When it came to hand-to-hand combat, he could fight Jiang Shi to a standstill. However, their sparring didn't interest Guan much. Despite watching them, his thoughts were actually on Leah. Since escaping from a desperate situation, Leah had been chased by the Sky Demon Great Sect. Fortunately, no particularly strong entities had set their sights on him yet, and the strongest among his pursuers were only at the wandering immortal realm. Leah was currently engaged in battle. Most followers within the Sky Demon Great Sect were reincarnations of heavenly demons, awakening their original souls, but there were also some infiltrators from outer heaven who had descended as demons, nearly all of whom had cultivation levels above the immortal Tao fourth layer heaven. After years of warfare with the immortal dynasty, the Holy Court's control over outer heaven was weakening. Guan lifted his gaze and saw figures coming and going from the great heavenly spirit land without anyone daring to block them. In such circumstances, the Sky Demon Great Sect was rising swiftly, spreading across the world like a wildfire. Guan's immortal seeking island would be affected in the future as well. Watching Leah battling fiercely, Guan's thoughts drifted to the future, contemplating an appropriate time to reap the growth of the Sky Demon Great Sect. Guan had no intention of blindly playing the savior, but if threatened, or if those he cared about were threatened, he would show no mercy. He lived in seclusion, but that didn't mean he would stand idly by. After observing Leah for a while longer, Guan's gaze shifted toward Anhao. Anhao was about to undergo nirvana. He was still imprisoned, waiting for the Yangxian Emperor to return. Once released, after his nirvana, Anhao would re-emerge into the world, embarking on the path of the heaven-favored. Compared to Leah, Anhao's journey would be smooth, continuing his past grace. Guan then turned his attention to other old acquaintances, and as he did, his thoughts suddenly turned to Xiaochuan and Yang Jian. Both had entered the reincarnation vortex, yet there had been no word from them, and Guan could no longer feel the destruction Dao seal on Xiaochuan's soul, indicating a great distance between them. After a long while, Jiang Shi came to the base of the tree, looking up to ask, "Master, how did we perform just now?" And Xingtian also walked over, expectantly looking up at Guan. Guan withdrew his divine thought, glanced at them, and said thoughtfully, "In truth, both of your growth rates are rapid, you can be considered geniuses. You don't need to be so tense. There's no need to prove anything to me. Strong or weak, as long as you don't betray me, I naturally won't abandon you." These two disciples had many merits, but every time they saw him, they became nervous, and they were eager to demonstrate their abilities, which made him feel uncomfortable. Upon hearing this, Xingtian smiled. Jiang Shi also let out a sigh of relief. Unlike an Xian and Long Qing, they had sought Guan for their own gain, so they could never be at ease in front of him, always maintaining a deep reverence for him. Guan then added, "In a while, I'll arrange for a disciple to spar with you. The two of you will take him on together, to broaden your horizons." On hearing this, Shengsheng's eyes brightened as he asked, "Is it a disciple from the Third Medicine Valley?" They had naturally heard of the Third Medicine Valley, but had never been there. Even though Mystic Valley had a transmission array platform, the disciples from the two valleys were not permitted to use it for visits, a rule set by Guan himself. Anyone who violated this rule was expelled from Medicine Valley. "Yes, unlike the others, he's a direct disciple like you. This lad is combative, so don't underestimate him," Guan replied, and with that, he descended from the tree. Upon hearing this, Jiang Shi and Xingtian tensed up again. Guan, somewhat helplessly, said, "Don't be nervous. Even if you lose, it's normal. My aim is just to enhance your practical experience." The two exchanged a glance, then forced a smile, clearly strained. Guan found it dull and shook his head, then turned and walked away, refusing their offer to follow. "Continue your cultivation. The tribulations of the world are increasing. Who knows, they might reach Mystic Valley one day, and then we'll need you two to guard Mystic Valley." Upon hearing Gu An's words, the pair stopped in their tracks, their fighting spirit suddenly ignited. They didn't believe Mystic Valley could be in danger. Clearly, this was Gu An's test for them. Guan made his way back to the Third Medicine Valley. As soon as he stepped from the transmission array platform, someone blocked his path. "I am Lu Changjing. I wish to have a word with the Valley Master, if you may," said a middle-aged man standing before Guan, bowing respectfully. But before he could finish, Guan interrupted him. "Immortal Fall Gorge doesn't qualify." Guan walked past Lu Changjing, heading towards his loft. Immortal Fall Gorge was Lu Changjing's sect, a great sect on the seas. Guan knew of it through the causal threads he saw surrounding Lu Changjing. The strongest within Immortal Fall Gorge had attained the divine immortal of wondrous Dharma realm, which, in Gu An's eyes, indeed did not qualify. Upon hearing Gu An's words, Lu Changjing's face flushed. He turned around, wanting to speak, but seeing Gu An's retreating figure, he dared not show anger or figure out how to retain him. For Guan to speak directly of Immortal Fall Gorge indicated he truly did not regard it highly. Is he Sword Venerable Fudao himself, or a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao? Lu Changjing frowned in thought. Being rejected was regrettable, but the thought that the other party might indeed be Sword Venerable Fudao filled him with excitement. The Sword Venerable Fudao was an existence comparable to the Yang Xian Emperor. Lu Changjing took a deep breath and turned to visit the main city of Sect of the Supreme Sect. As he turned around, a figure barred his way. He looked up and involuntarily furrowed his brows. This emperor has some connections with Immortal Fall Gorge. "Take me there," the Yang Xian Emperor said indifferently to Lu Changjing. Overwhelmed by the Yang Xian Emperor's imposing aura, Lu Changjing cautiously asked, "May I inquire who Daoist friend is?" "Yang Xian Emperor, have you ever heard of him?" "What?" Lu Changjing's face changed dramatically, a look of terror etched on his features. Passing disciples who heard the three words, Yang Xian Emperor, instinctively turned their heads to look, as the Yang Xian Emperor with a wave of his sleeve, disappeared into thin air along with Lu Changjing. Far away, Shen Xinzi, who was meditating under a tree, furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with a look of shock. That man was actually the lord of the immortal dynasty, the Yang Xian Emperor. Over the past 100 years, he had played many games of chess with Yang Xian Emperor and always found him inscrutable. He hadn't realized his origin was so extraordinary. If even the Yang Xian Emperor would come to spend a century in the Third Medicine Valley, what kind of legendary figures might appear in the future? Shen Xinzi turned his head towards where Guan stood, feeling that Gu An's silhouette was so majestic as if he could bear the weight of the heavens collapsing. 30 years later. At the subsect of Supreme Sect, Yi Mansion. Guan and Yilan were enjoying tea in the courtyard. The fragrance of the tea pervaded the air, attracting several spirit birds to perch on the branches. It was a rare occasion without Jin Qin causing a nuisance. Guan and Yilan were both enjoying the moment. With one hand propping her chin, Yilan looked at Guan and asked with a smile, "Recently, Su Jia from your Third Medicine Valley has become quite famous. Even the news has reached our subsect, hasn't it?" "That kid's talent is indeed outstanding. He's really brought honor to the Third Medicine Valley," Guan responded with a smile. Su Jia had become a master disciple after only 5 years in the Third Medicine Valley. Guan did not give him personal guidance. He received the same treatment as the other disciples. This resulted in Su Jia not having a strong sense of belonging to the Third Medicine Valley, treating it merely as a stepping stone in his journey of cultivation. Su Jia was not particularly enthusiastic about Sword Venerable Fudao, and Guan even heard him privately telling other disciples that he would surpass Sword Venerable Fudao one day. Yilan chuckled, more and more geniuses have emerged from the Third Medicine Valley over the years, and your disciples all show up under my command. Her eyes held admiration as she looked at Guan. Even setting aside the fact that Guan was a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao, she had always respected his own capabilities. Ever since they were young, it seemed there was nothing that her senior brother couldn't do. Then I'll have to trouble you to look out for them more, Guan replied with a smile and picked up a piece of pastry from the table, which was made by Yilan herself. Although the taste was not particularly delicious, the sentiment behind it meant the most. Yilan curiously asked, would you say Su Jia is your most outstanding disciple? Su Jia, with his lifespan limit of 9,000 years and dazzling talent, was someone Yilan also wished to recruit. Guan shook his head and said, how could that be? My most talented disciple is currently making a breakthrough. Oh. Breaking through to which realm? The Nirvana realm. The Nirvana realm? Impossible. You're joking, right? Isn't this disciple much older than you? Not at all, he's 34 years younger than me. Someone over 800 years old breaking through to the Nirvana realm? I don't believe it, you're teasing me again, Yilan exclaimed with skepticism. She had never heard of anyone succeeding in reaching the Nirvana realm before 1,000 years of age. Guan laughed, offering no further explanation. He was talking about An Hao, who was undergoing tribulation with the help of immortal spirits from the immortal dynasty, and even the young Xian Emperor himself was present to witness his tribulation. Boom! The sound of thunder rolled in from the skies. Yilan looked up to see dark clouds rushing in, carrying the potential to envelop the heavens. Yilan teasingly asked, that wouldn't be the celestial phenomena triggered by the breakthrough of that disciple of yours, would it? Guan also looked up and said, of course not. However, this commotion is indeed caused by a breakthrough. The holy minister was making a breakthrough. Advancing to the free immortal realm. Guan sensed it was going to be an interesting event. With the eruption of this phenomenon, many powerful existences quickly flew towards the holy court. The immortal dynasty, the Xianyu divine dynasty, and the sky demon great sect certainly wouldn't let the holy minister have a peaceful tribulation. After a quick calculation, Guan realized that the future held new variables. A free immortal could change the fate of the world. Yilan's eyes sparkled with curiosity upon hearing Guan's words. What kind of realm was capable of causing such a breakthrough phenomenon? It was at that moment that Guan saw a powerful aura coming from the depths of the cosmos. A meteorite wrapped in demonic chi was hurtling out of the silent destruction domain, bearing down on the great heavenly spirit land with unstoppable force. Such momentum suggested it had the cultivation level of the 9th layer of the free immortal realm. Guan hadn't been particularly concerned, for in recent years, there had been more than a handful of free immortals arriving in the great heavenly spirit land. But suddenly, he felt a familiar presence. This aura was the Annihilation God Emperor. With memories of Long Zhan, Guan vividly remembered the aura of the Annihilation God Emperor. Indeed, this aura belonged to him, albeit not as powerful as what Long Zhan remembered. Chapter 428 Long Qing's fear Holy Minister broke through. Annihilation God Emperor descended. Guan recalculated the momentum of great heavenly spirit land and found that the future became blurred. Many things could not be thoroughly predicted. Most critically, Guan was unclear about the purpose of the Annihilation God Emperor's visit to the great heavenly spirit land. Long Zhan was from an era far distant from his own, with the battle court he established becoming ancient legend, making the Annihilation God Emperor only stronger than before. How could he not be wary? Even if this presence of the Annihilation God Emperor was just the aura of the free immortal, Guan believed that his true form would be an incredibly tricky existence. Under Guan's watch, the meteorite carrying the aura of the Annihilation God Emperor rapidly approached the great heavenly spirit land. The powerful beings within the great heavenly spirit land were also alarmed by the Annihilation God Emperor, all using divine thought and divine sense to probe, but no one dared to obstruct the Annihilation God Emperor. Within the holy land of the Holy Court, vast heavenly thunder covered tens of thousands of miles of sky. The holy minister amidst the tribulation looked up, his eyes revealing a wary expression. He knew his crossing of tribulation would bring trouble, but he had not expected such a powerful being to come. The aura of the annihilation god emperor reminded him of the primordial immortal king from before. He cursed the heavens for being unfair, but at this point, he could only grit his teeth and break through. Once the heavenly tribulation began, there was no turning back, either die or succeed in crossing. He leveraged the chi fortune of the holy court to break through. He could not afford to lose, because if he failed, the entire holy court would suffer greatly, chi fortune connecting every living being of the court. Rings upon rings of grand formations guarded the holy minister, dazzling and emitting vast and infinite pressure, countering the heavenly might, stirring chaos in the heaven and earth rules, which also caused the surrounding mountains and oceans of the holy court to trigger cataclysms. Under the holy minister's gaze, a meteor streaked across the sky, the celestial thunder unable to obscure the meteor's brilliance. At this moment, not only the holy minister saw the meteor, great cultivators and demons from various powers across the land also saw it. Inside Yi Mansion, Yilan also saw the meteor crossing the horizon, and for some reason, she felt an unexplained palpitation. She couldn't help but look towards Guan and asked, "Did you see that meteor just now?" Guan nodded, said, "Did you make a wish?" Yilan gave him a glance, a worried expression across her brow, said, "At that moment just now, I was inexplicably scared." The annihilation god emperor remained silent for a while, then suddenly waved his sleeve, and the earth regained its calm. Pieces of rubble and wooden pillars rose and flew toward the distance. After doing all this, he disappeared on the cliff. The cries beneath the cliff abruptly ceased, and the whole world fell into silence. In the evening, Guan entered the third medicine valley, watching the annihilation god emperor travel the other side of the world, temporarily unable to discern his purpose. The annihilation god emperor did not head toward the holy court, indicating that he was not attracted by the holy minister's tribulation. He seemed more like he was searching for something. Perhaps it was no coincidence, fearing the holy minister's tribulation might affect what he was seeking. As soon as Guan entered the valley, Long Qing hurried over, his face eager to please, expressing concern and warmth. "Get lost. If you can't comprehend, it means the time isn't right, and your mindset is still not stable," Guan glared at Long Qing and said thus. Within the supreme sect, many believed Guan was a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao, but many disciples within the third medicine valley, including Long Qing, thought Guan was Sword Venerable Fudao himself. This was also confirmed by Shinxinzi, who now showed extreme respect for Guan, entirely in the manner of a junior. "How long must I wait? Why do I have to wait?" Long Qing asked indignantly. Guan suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the annihilation god emperor was here for Long Qing? It was very likely. Guan said sternly, "You already know your physique is special, can't you guess that you might be carrying a significant cause and effect? If you don't settle down, you'll face great trouble, and even I won't be able to protect you, possibly not even the whole world." His tone was severe, causing Long Qing to be stunned. As Long Qing reflected on Guan's words, he couldn't help feeling uneasy and panicked. Guan was influencing his emotions with his Taoist intent. He had to scare the young man. Without absolute certainty, Guan dared not let Long Qing reveal his true identity. The cause and effect of the Dragon Clan were too significant, likely to draw the real body of the annihilation god emperor and the current battle court. Long Qing's expression shifted uncertainly, but Guan did not continue to frighten him and instead walked past him. Just a few steps away, an Exian arrived, reporting that some disciples were fighting and needed his intervention. Hearing the names of the fighters, Guan understood why an Exian had to seek him out. Two geniuses. Ranked among the top in talent within the valley, they had not yet completed their training, but already great cultivators and notable families were trying to recruit them. It's typical of geniuses, they tend to be arrogant, and when arrogant individuals meet, conflicts are inevitable. Guan followed an Exian, not feeling troubled, his thoughts still on the annihilation god emperor. The setting sun was like blood, but it didn't add a touch of tragedy over Third Medicine Valley. It was still full of vitality. The holy minister's tribulation eventually led to a great battle, with the Immortal Dynasty, Xianyu Divine Dynasty, Sky Demon Great Sect, and a few forces bearing grudges against the Holy Court all attacking together. The battle was spectacular, prompting even Guan to watch. Despite the perilous process and countless casualties, the Holy Court survived the ordeal, and in the end, the Holy Minister made a breakthrough and even fought a great battle with Yang Xian Emperor. Although the Holy Minister was a civilian official, his combat strength was formidable, able to hold his ground against the Yang Xian Emperor, which surprised Guan. The Yang Xian Emperor did not entangle further, otherwise, his alliance with the Xianyu Divine Dynasty and the Sky Demon Great Sect's free immortal might have been able to eliminate the Holy Minister. This battle passed, but it also laid down a greater cause of trouble for the future. Thus, Great Heavenly Spirit Land welcomed a brief period of peace. 8 years quickly passed. One day, Guan, accompanied by an Xian and Blood Prison Great Saint, arrived at Tianya Valley. LV Xian had unexpectedly returned, specifically to seek out Guan. Before meeting with LV Xian, Guan collected medicinal herbs first. LV Xian took him into his cave and, after activating the cave's restrictions, asked nervously, "Are you Sword Venerable Fudao?" Chapter 429 Heavenly Tao has its own fixed number. Facing LV Xian's inquiry, Guan raised an eyebrow and said, "So the news has reached your ears?" LV Xian crossed his arms in front of his chest, chuckling proudly, "Of course. That's really slow." "What?" LV Xian's smile froze, uncertain of what to say. If it were anyone else, he would have responded with a kick, but facing Guan, what could he do? Endure, that's what. Guan found his expression amusing, so he pretended to be mysterious and said, "That's right, I am Sword Venerable Fudao. However, many people don't believe it and think that I am just a disciple of Sword Venerable Fudao. You must keep this matter between us. Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know." Upon hearing this, LV Xian became excited. His body trembled as he asked carefully, "Is it true? Why, let me know." Guan's gaze deepened as he said, "Even though you are no match for me, in my eyes, you are the only one who poses a threat to my talent. And Hao doesn't have what it takes, he's too compliant and will stumble eventually. Only those prodigies who survive can be considered strong." LV Xian was deeply moved, his fists clenched and blood boiling with excitement. Guan was satisfied with his reaction. Winning people over with just a few words, why not? Then, Guan went and sat down at a stone table to the side. LV Xian snapped back to reality and hurried to follow. Sitting across from Guan, LV Xian asked nervously, "Is it your talent, or are you the reincarnation of a great power, or have you concealed your age?" Guan looked at him and replied, "When you reach the Immortal Path realm, you'll understand a stage called Reincarnation Tribulation." Reincarnation Tribulation? LV Xian was captivated just by the name. Guan asked, "You didn't come to find me just to confirm this, did you?" He could guess LV Xian's purpose, but he preferred to hear LV Xian say it himself. LV Xian took a deep breath and said, "The Xianyu Divine Dynasty has invited me to join. Lately, I've been thinking about breaking away from His Majesty. What's your view on the Xianyu Divine Dynasty?" Guan knew about the rift between LV Xian and Li Xiandao. As Li Xiandao was becoming stronger, he began to reveal his true nature, like Guan, and became increasingly domineering, which added to the pressure on those around him. Guan replied, "If you want it as a stepping stone, then it indeed is a good place. But if you plan to stay with the Xianyu Divine Dynasty, they will all go up in smoke." LV Xian's eyes widened as he asked, "The Xianyu Divine Dynasty will be destroyed?" Guan chuckled, "To be more precise, all the powers of this world will go up in smoke. The old forces will turn to dust." "Including the Supreme Sect, Taizong Dynasty?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because the world has its cycles, and the Heavenly Tao has its set parameters." Doesn't that mean all my efforts are meaningless?" LV Xian turned pale, completely disheartened. Guan shook his head, his words laden with profound meaning. Someone always survives. But think about it, if all the powers of the world disappear and 99% of beings turn to dust, and you survive, then after weathering that period, what will your status be in this world? Excitement shone on LV Xian's face as he thought more about it. He was so elated at the idea of being one of the supreme beings of the world that he even ignored how he would survive to that point. His gaze towards Guan changed, filled with admiration. What level of cultivation was needed to foresee such an outcome? He didn't doubt Guan's words because he had also heard legends about the evolution of the world. Many cataclysms had swept through the world since ancient times. From what he could see, the world was far from destruction. At least, there were no signs in sight. Indeed, Sword Venerable Fudao was the most formidable, even the Yang Xian Emperor couldn't compare. LV Xian became exhilarated and started pressing for more information. Guan did not reveal more about the fortune of heaven and earth, but regarding some trivial information that he could disclose, he considered it taking care of LV Baishan's son. Half an ancient hour later, Guan, accompanied by LV Xian, walked out of the cave. Luo Han watched LV Xian's respectful demeanor and couldn't help but laugh. This LV Xian was so proud by nature that even the emperor had never been shown such reverence. It was unknown what abilities this young Guan possessed to make a proud figure like LV Xian submit. Luo Han watched from a distance, then approached them. Guan, where is the book? Asked Luo Han as he reached Guan. Guan casually took out Dream of the Red Chamber and handed it to him, saying, Green Hero Travel will be after a while. The author went out to make a breakthrough. Luo Han's old face turned red as he said, What Green Hero Travel? I just like Dream of the Red Chamber. LV Xian asked curiously, What is Green Hero Travel? Dream of the Red Chamber. He knew of it because being interested in Guan, he had read all of Guan's writings. An Exan walked over and, hearing their conversation, couldn't help but look at Luo Han with an odd expression, causing Luo Han extreme embarrassment, wishing he could find a crack in the ground to hide in. After Guan left Tianya Valley with an Exan and Blood Prison Great Saint, an Exan began disparaging Luo Han, saying she hadn't expected the esteemed Luo Han to read such vulgar books. Guan looked ahead, filled with dissatisfaction. Stinking girl, daring to scold indirectly. He'd have to make her suffer a bit when guiding her cultivation later. In the wilderness, a gentle breeze blew. And Hao, dressed like a wandering swordsman, strolled along a mountain path with his hands raised, his sword scabbard resting on his shoulders through the crook of his arm, his head tilted back, looking carefree. After attaining the Nirvana realm, he had completely shed his youthful naivety, and now exuded an inscrutable aura, embodying the elegance of a high-level practitioner. Who? A gust of wind blew towards him from up front, rustling in Hao's hair. His half-closed eyes suddenly opened wide. He looked towards the top of the hill in front of him, where a towering figure stood, its black robe fluttering in the wind. Annihilation God Emperor. And Hao found that he couldn't see the stranger's true face, which meant that the stranger either possessed an extremely high cultivation level or had some kind of treasure on him. He believed the former was more likely. And Hao, who had traveled far and wide for many years, had encountered many powerful beings, yet none were as mysterious and formidable as the person before him. He was not afraid and continued walking forward. The Annihilation God Emperor stood still on the hilltop. As Hao passed by him, the God Emperor suddenly said, Your life grid is extraordinary, you are destined not to belong to this world. And Hao stopped in his tracks, didn't turn his head, and instead gazed at the distant rugged mountains, asking, Oh? To which world do I belong, then? To a higher realm. Once you transcend the 9 heavens of the immortal path, you'll be able to go there. Is that so? May I ask if your excellency comes from that realm? And Hao did not sound surprised, his tone as calm as ever. The Annihilation God Emperor turned around. And Hao turned to face him, only 5 steps apart. Looking under the God Emperor's helmet at the pitch darkness, and Hao felt wary but not intimidated. Even before Nirvana, and Hao often faced beings far surpassing his own realm. No matter where he was, he had never been afraid, he had long regarded life and death indifferently. Suddenly, a purple vortex appeared under the Annihilation God Emperor's helmet. And Hao unconsciously looked at it, his gaze changing and losing its brightness. Chapter 430, The Strongest Loneliness. And Hao had a dream in which he found himself seated upon an immensely grand chair, with a Qilin crawling at his feet and true dragons swirling around his hands. Below him was a radiant starry sky, and figures exuding powerful auras floated beneath him like a series of steps. The sensation was incredibly wonderful. He felt as if he had control over everything and even experienced a sense of loneliness. Immersed in this feeling, he lost track of time. He did not know how much time had passed when suddenly, a dazzling golden light burst from the depth of the universe below and rushed towards him, turning the powerful figures along its path into ash. The golden light shone on Hao's face, making it feel scorching hot to the point of burning. And Hao suddenly opened his eyes, gasping for breath with sweat covering his forehead and his pupils still trembling. What met his gaze was the twilight sky, and his eyes instinctively caught the sight of the figure of the Annihilation God Emperor. The Annihilation God Emperor stood nearby, gazing up at the sky, seemingly lost in thought. And Hao sat up and was about to stand when the Annihilation God Emperor's finger pressed on his forehead, rendering him immobile. At that moment, Hao felt his mana and chi blood freeze, making him extremely uncomfortable. Having reached the Nirvana realm, he had felt so powerful, confident to handle anything. But at that moment, he felt as if he had returned to the mortal realm, feeling his own insignificance once again. He looked up at the Annihilation God Emperor, his expression of shock rapidly turning into one of resentment. You have the same look in your eyes as he did, possessing the same life grid, but you are still far from his level, the Annihilation God Emperor said, looking down at Hao. And Hao gritted his teeth and asked, "Who is he?" "His name cannot be mentioned. This entire great heaven and earth cannot bear its consequences. If mentioned, this great heaven and earth would instantaneously turn into nothingness." And Hao's eyes widened. It was the first time he heard of such power. Neither the Yangxian Emperor nor Holy Heaven could achieve such feats. Having traversed so many great heaven and earths, it is rare to encounter someone with such a grand life grid as yours. I grant you a divine skill, now it remains to be seen how high you can reach. As he spoke, the Annihilation God Emperor's index finger emitted demonic chi, which burrowed into Hao's forehead. And Hao, unable to move, was extremely nervous. As the demonic chi entered his body, he did not feel any discomfort, which made him even more uneasy. The Annihilation God Emperor withdrew his hand and said, "What you saw earlier were the memories of that being. Remember that sensation, it is the power you must strive with all your might to pursue." With those words, the Annihilation God Emperor vanished from the spot. And Hao then, freed from constraint, swiftly got up. He could no longer sense the presence of the Annihilation God Emperor, not a trace was left, as if everything he had experienced was just an illusion. Who exactly is he? And Hao furrowed his brows, touching his forehead subconsciously, feeling that he had gotten himself into big trouble. Meanwhile, far away in the Third Medicine Valley, Guan withdrew his gaze. When the Annihilation God Emperor approached Hao, he had been paying attention. This Annihilation God Emperor was merely a free immortal in terms of cultivation level. If he dared to harm Hao, Guan could eradicate him even faster, but it seemed as though the Annihilation God Emperor intended to bring an opportunity to Hao. After the Annihilation God Emperor left, Guan checked Hao's fate once more and found that his future had changed. Hao was already on the path of the chosen, but after receiving the legacy from the Annihilation God Emperor, Hao grew even stronger, which reminded Guan of Long Zhan and Lu Han, who could just barely surpass him. What exactly is the origin of the Annihilation God Emperor? What does a higher realm refer to? Guan looked up, and beyond the outer heaven was the universe, surrounded by the silent destruction domain. The entire universe seemed infinitely vast, with no end to be seen in any direction. His gaze involuntarily fell upon the boundary gate, guarded by the heavenly spirit god. Perhaps to reach beyond the universe, one must pass through that gate. But, approaching the boundary gate would mean destruction by the heavenly spirit god, a terrifying existence capable of effortlessly annihilating the Taoist hidden immortal. Guan then thought of the immortals he had encountered. It seemed that there were even more terrifying and vast beings above the immortal path. Master, the sect leader is here to see you. A disciple ran up to Guan and whispered. Guan, standing in front of a wooden railing, withdrew his gaze and nodded to the disciple, then walked towards his loft. Returning to the room, Guan saw LV Badian, who immediately rose to greet him. I've told you so many times, there's no need for such formality, it feels so alienating, Guan complained. As LV Badian watched him walk over and sit down, he finally spoke, I was ignorant before. Knowing your true identity now, proper courtesy must be observed. Guan's face remained unchanged, but he was pleased inside. Old LV really understood people's hearts. He invited LV Badian to sit and asked why he had come. Your disciple, Su Jia, had a conflict with a family. It was a misunderstanding, and I have had the family release him and have tried hard to ease the relationship. However, Su Jia is still unhappy, LV Badian began, his face showing helplessness as he spoke. Due to the prior incident with the Wu Ju, LV Badian dared not be careless. With such extraordinary talent, Su Jia likely had Guan's guidance behind him. He had to handle the situation carefully. Guan replied nonchalantly, if he's unhappy, so be it. The supreme sect must not indulge him. LV Badian pondered the underlying meaning of Guan's words and responded, he's still young after all, and his talent is indeed rare. He reminds me of Anhao in his earlier years. Mentioning Anhao made him think of an Xian, and his expression turned strange. When many things were connected, they seemed so absurd. He also wondered what Anhao's feelings would be if he knew all this. Anhao didn't know who his own master was, only knowing that his master had transformed into Sword Venerable Fudao. Are there a shortage of geniuses in this world now? Just treat him normally, no need to consider me. He is just a passerby from the Third Medicine Valley and has not truly become my disciple, Guan said carelessly. Hearing this, LV Badian became even more interested in Su Jia. Without the guidance of Sword Venerable Fudao, Su Jia had still shown such talent. Such a genius must be properly cultivated. The key was to bring him under his command, to become his strength. Seeing Guan truly uninterested in Su Jia, LV Badian started discussing other matters, hoping Guan would provide guidance for the future development of the Supreme Sect. A full ancient hour passed before LV Badian finally left. Guan personally saw him down the stairs. Before parting, the two kept bowing to each other, causing nearby disciples to talk. Guan looked at LV Badian's departing figure and noticed that LV Badian's karma had changed. Killer calamity. He immediately calculated LV Badian's life grid and his expression became strange. Due to his words today, LV Badian would face calamity. LV Badian would find death due to Su Jia. Chapter 431. Involuntarily in Guan's projections, LV Badian would focus on nurturing Su Jia in the future, treating him as the next sect leader to be groomed, and even betrothed the daughter of the LV family's patriarch to Su Jia, as if she were his own child. Su Jia did not disappoint LV Badian, his growth rate was not inferior to Anhao's, and he, too, took Anhao as his target. 500 years later, when Anhao returned, Su Jia, overrating his own ability, challenged Anhao. Even though Anhao suppressed his cultivation level, he still easily defeated Su Jia. After that, Su Jia's personality drastically changed, becoming paranoid. He practiced cultivation even more diligently, treating getting stronger as the most important thing. He even schemed for LV Badian's defying fate divine skill and eventually succeeded in persuading LV Badian to pass on the skill to him. After the transmission of the skill, LV Badian became a cripple and returned to the LV family, only to have the LV family attacked by Su Jia's enemies. In that chaos, LV Badian died. Although Guan could see the future, he was not panicked, because he knew these events would occur only if he did not intervene. To deduce cause and effect one must set oneself aside, an approach that allows for more accurate foresight. This is why many who are aware of their heavenly destiny refuse to engage in worldly affairs, because they cannot predict the choices they would make in the future, and thus they try not to change the course of the world. Guan was not displeased with Su Jia because of this. He was more reflective on both of their fates. LV Baishan's choice to choose Su Jia brought disaster upon himself, and it wasn't that Su Jia intended to harm him. It could only be said that fate was playing tricks on people. One thought can turn one into a demon or make one an immortal, but who really knows whether their own thought is right or wrong? Guan muttered to himself, truly moved. Downstairs, the blood prison great saint looked up, pondering the words of his master. Could it be that LV Badian was about to become a demon? That would be just great. The blood prison great saint had no fondness for LV Badian at all. Knowing that LV Badian might be in trouble, he only felt schadenfreude, even looking forward to LV Badian disappointing Guan. After watching for a while, Guan turned and walked back inside the house. Night fell, and the lights of the third Medicine Valley lit up one after another, revealing the mortal world's charms. 20 years later. In the third Medicine Valley, the sunlight was bright, birds circled above, and the shapes of disciples practicing cultivation could be seen everywhere, with Supreme Sect disciples riding demon birds flying across the sky. Guan lay underneath the mystic pure tree with his hands behind his head, looking at his attribute panel. Name, Guan, lifespan, 899/1, 393, 608, 114, physique, mixed Yuan Dao golden body, cultivation level, perfect Xian Yuan Zi Zai immortal realm, almost 1.4 billion years of lifespan and close to 900 years old. Guan, looking at his age, felt the passage of time, unaware of how old he had grown. Yet his mentality remained young, and he was still able to converse with some of the younger disciples. The fat as a buffalo white spirit rat came over and nuzzled his waist with its head, in a flattering manner. Guan paid it no attention. It followed and circled to his front and said in a low voice, "Master." It spoke in a childlike voice, indistinguishable between male or female. Last year, the white spirit rat had just learned to speak the human language. Its growth also brought liveliness to the third Medicine Valley. Almost every disciple who entered the valley had been bullied by it. It had a strong presence in the third Medicine Valley, and the disciples respectfully kept their distance. After all, it was the master's demon pet. They couldn't fight back even if bullied by it. "Spit it out if you have something to say," Guan said impatiently, looking at the white spirit rat with annoyance. The creature had recently been pestering him to raise a batch of female rabbit demons, which he found quite disgraceful. How could he, so esteemed and virtuous, have raised such a demon pet? Guan thought of the 3 Tian Yaoer sisters and the deep-sea dragon carp, seeming somewhat abnormal as well. In contrast, the blood prison great saint was quite steady. He would focus on nurturing the blood prison great saint from now on. "Master, I had a dream earlier, where I was cultivating, and I still remember. It was a fist technique. Would you take a look?" The white spirit rat said softly, its beady eyes filled with excitement. Because of its obesity, it lacked the cunning look of a rat demon, appearing rather foolish instead. Guan sat up and said, "I want to see what fist technique you can comprehend." The white spirit rat spent years meditating under the mystic pure tree, consuming heavenly materials and earthly treasures, and its maximum lifespan kept increasing. In a way, this was also a talent, as not everyone could increase their lifespan just by being under the mystic pure tree. The white spirit rat jumped aside and then stood up, supporting its body on its fatty hind legs. Under Guan's gaze, the white spirit rat started to perform fists. As it threw its punches, gusts of wind kicked up the grass, drawing the attention of nearby disciples. Guan's expression was odd. The white spirit rat's fist technique was not impressive, clearly mimicking Long Qing's moves, yet a mountain of flesh-throwing punches was very bizarre. To say it was comical, but its body moved rhythmically, each punch was executed with precision. After the white spirit rat had demonstrated a set of fist techniques, it turned to look at Guan with a hopeful expression. Hearing the words of the Annihilation God Emperor, Yu Yingying instinctively panicked. Are you talking to me? Yu Yingying stared at the Annihilation God Emperor and asked. The Annihilation God Emperor did not stop, continuing on his way, leaving behind a perplexing comment for Yu Yingying. Cherish the present. There will come a time when you are powerless to control your fate. A time when she is powerless to control her fate? Yu Yingying furrowed her brows, immediately feeling uneasy. The Annihilation God Emperor eventually reached Gu An's pavilion, where the Blood Prison Great Saint looked up at him, his eyes filled with curiosity. Reincarnation Path Emperor, aren't you going to show yourself? The Annihilation God Emperor spoke, saying words that Shinshinzi, who was eavesdropping from afar, could not hear. After hearing what the Annihilation God Emperor had said to Yu Yingying, Shinshinzi became curious and puzzled about him, but unfortunately, the Annihilation God Emperor did not allow his eavesdropping to continue. Reincarnation Path Emperor? The Blood Prison Great Saint promptly stood up, watching the Annihilation God Emperor warily. The Annihilation God Emperor glanced at him and said, Future Great Saint, sit down. Pretend you saw nothing, heard nothing. My future identity has been seen through by him? He is a real master. How extraordinary. Blood Prison Great Saint's heart raced with excitement, as he began to fantasize about his own future greatness. He was not afraid of the Annihilation God Emperor Kaos. Chapter 432, 10 million incarnations. While the Blood Prison Great Saint was still lost in his vivid fantasies, Ji Xiaoyu's room door opened. Dressed in black, Ji Xiaoyu stepped out of the house, her gaze settling on the Annihilation God Emperor, filled with doubt. The Annihilation God Emperor's gaze rested on Ji Xiaoyu, his expression remaining calm. At this moment, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared beside Ji Xiaoyu, vigilantly staring at the Annihilation God Emperor. Who might you be? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor asked in a deep voice, his eyes betraying a strong sense of wariness. He, strong as a divine thought true immortal, couldn't see through the Annihilation God Emperor's cultivation level at all, which gave him the same feeling he got when facing Guan. The Annihilation God Emperor spoke up, Reincarnation Path Emperor, you should remember me. He completely ignored the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor, feeling like the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor wasn't worthy of conversation. Upon hearing this, Ji Xiaoyu's face changed dramatically, her expression one of disbelief, her body trembling as she struggled to compose herself. Seeing her like this made the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor even more nervous, while the Blood Prison Great Saint curiously looked at Ji Xiaoyu, seeing her in such a state for the first time. Taking a deep breath, Ji Xiaoyu raised her hand in salute and said, The Junior has seen the Divine Emperor. May I ask why the Divine Emperor has personally come to the great heaven and earth? The Divine Emperor? The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared to realize something, his look towards the Annihilation God Emperor filled with reverence. He stepped back, half kneeling, bowing his proud head. The Blood Prison Great Saint was even more curious about the identity of the Annihilation God Emperor, his blood beginning to boil. The stronger the Annihilation God Emperor, the more likely his words would come true. He might yet become a great saint of the great heavenly spirit land. The Annihilation God Emperor said, I am here to find someone, a remnant of the ancient evil demons. Ancient evil demons? Ji Xiaoyu asked in surprise. Descendant from the long family of the battle court. The answer from the Annihilation God Emperor made Ji Xiaoyu's pupils widen sharply. Ji Xiaoyu asked with a frown, that clan still has descendants? Weren't they already extinct? The Annihilation God Emperor stared at her and queried, Do you really not know? Ji Xiaoyu fell silent. The Annihilation God Emperor continued, I am aware your master is from the Dragon Clan, but you must have seen their malice. Should a living person carry such hatred, the catastrophe he could cause is beyond what you or I could foresee. That would not be a catastrophe for one great heaven and earth, but a crisis for the entire universe. Ji Xiaoyu replied, I really don't know, and currently I am undergoing the reincarnation tribulation. I have memories, but not the genuine feelings of my true self. The Annihilation God Emperor turned around, his gaze sweeping over the third Medicine Valley. Ji Xiaoyu followed his gaze, her heart suddenly trembling as she realized his gaze had fallen on Guan. Guan lay beneath the mystic pure tree, his eyes covered by leaves, as if he were sleeping. The Annihilation God Emperor looked at Guan, pausing for a while before shifting his gaze elsewhere. Ji Xiaoyu didn't dare disturb him, waiting for him to speak. If she felt this way, the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor was no different. After a long time, the Annihilation God Emperor turned his head towards Ji Xiaoyu and said, "Indeed, his aura and causality are nowhere in this land, but I will draw him out. Once you conclude this lifetime, you may come to assist me, and I will not leave you unrewarded." Having said this, the Annihilation God Emperor transformed into his true form, his black robe fluttering, his scale armor glinting with a chilly light, and the darkness beneath his helmet startled the blood prison great saint enough to widen his eyes. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor glanced over subconsciously, equally intimidated by the Annihilation God Emperor's appearance. The Annihilation God Emperor vanished into thin air. Far away, Shen Xinzi, though unable to hear their conversation, saw the true figure of the Annihilation God Emperor and was startled, rising involuntarily. Not just him, some curious disciples also witnessed the transformation of the Annihilation God Emperor. However, the sudden disappearance of the Annihilation God Emperor gave them the illusion that they were seeing things. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor stood up, took a step forward, and asked in a low voice, "Could it be that one from the legends of the Silent Destruction Domain?" Ji Xiaoyu looked up towards the sky and softly said, "Yes, that's the one." The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor appeared to be in a trance, and he couldn't help but ask, "Wasn't that just a legend?" "It actually exists. Your Majesty, what is your relationship with him?" Ji Xiaoyu replied, "I have once received the inheritance he left behind and communicated with his divine thoughts. He could be considered one of my mentors, and this was also the first time I truly saw him. The one just now must have been only an avatar." "Avatar?" the Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor exclaimed. "Yes, an avatar. He has countless avatars, spread across different worlds, all searching for his own way." Ji Xiaoyu's gaze became distant, as if filled with longing. The Sun and Moon Netherworld Emperor fell silent, equally shaken. Why is there another person trying to tell fortunes? Guan could hardly bear to let the other party suffer a loss, so he chose no. You refuse to let the other party tell your fortune. The person feels somewhat disappointed and bids you farewell. At the age of 15, you condensed a golden core with sword intent within, becoming an unmatched prodigy the purple micro-immortal mansion hadn't encountered in 10,000 years. At the age of 17, you were sent by the purple micro-immortal mansion to the 10,000 sword immortal ridge. On the way, you encountered someone being attacked by a demon cultivator, whose wife and children had already been slain. You felt compassionate, but the elder accompanying you advised you not to interfere too much. Will you choose to intervene and save them? Here it comes. Time to kick off the immortal chivalrous life. Save them. Ignoring the elder's advice, you forcefully step in. The attackers are relentless and even start to besiege you. Out of desperation, you execute your swordsmanship, slaying the demon cultivator leader and accidentally seize 87 years of lifespan, marking a turning point in your destiny. Here it comes. Guan had been wondering why there had been no prompt about seizing lifespan. It turns out this kid had never taken a life. Only at the age of 17 did he discover the ability to seize lifespan, indicating he truly had a heart of great kindness. Guan also grew curious. Could it be that before starting the lifespan samsara, what he had in mind could determine the nature within the reincarnation? That's quite possible. In his previous reincarnation evolution, he had thought about surviving as much as possible, so his character in the reincarnation was more paranoid. At the age of 18, you arrive at the 10,000 sword immortal ridge, where you stand out among the thousands of trialists, and you obtain your first immortal sword in this life, Jinghong. At the age of 19, after contemplating the sword intent of 10,000 sword immortal ridge, you gain the appreciation of the ancestor of 10,000 sword immortal Tao, who wishes to take you as his disciple. Will you choose to agree? Definitely agree. What's there to hesitate about? Start getting stronger. Guan thought this and made his decision immediately. You choose to be apprentice to the ancestor of 10,000 sword immortal Tao, you receive his instruction, and you begin to delve into the 10,000 sword immortal Tao. At 21, you finally step into the 10,000 sword immortal Tao. All of the swords in the 10,000 sword immortal ridge tremble for you. The ancestor is very satisfied with you and starts to personally train you in swordsmanship. Wait a minute. Guan wanted to refuse, but on second thought, refusing meant showing weakness. Yang Pingan likely harbored no intent to kill him. It would be a good test of Yang Xian's true strength. Without sword intent and spiritual power, could Yang Xian still defeat Yang Pingan? You agreed to Yang Pingan's challenge, and after a fierce battle, both of you were injured, with Yang Pingan winning by a narrow margin. He shouted out excitedly, venting out years of repressed frustration, and you could only let him travel the world. Before parting, Yang Pingan gave you 3 deep kowtows, saying he would never forget the kindness of your teachings. At 101, your wounds healed, you reconvened your sword intent and gained new insights. Seeing Yang Xian actually lose, Guan felt helplessly resigned, but thankfully Yang Pingan still had some conscience. The path of practice continued. Yang Xian gave up the ability to seize lifespan, yet his growth rate remained swift. He secluded himself in the deep mountains without wandering out, delving into the sword Tao, his cultivation advancing by leaps and bounds. Yang Pingan, however, did not return again. One prompt followed another. Quickly, time brought Yang Xian to the age of 500. At 507, you attained the accomplishment of perceiving everything in heaven and earth as a sword, and you buried all your swords at the bottom of a lake outside your island. At 508, a masked woman arrived at your island, claiming to be Fong Meng's daughter. Fong Meng was near death and wished to see you one last time. Did you choose to agree? Fong Meng? She actually had a daughter, but that was normal. Not all women can wait forever, especially since she was rejected by Yang Xian. With a sense of reminiscence in his heart, Guan then fell into hesitation.